A group of students is undergoing beast gene awakening, a brutal process that involves injecting a serum synthesized from raw monster DNA. The stronger a student's body, the more powerful the creature they can manifest. The moment the serum hits, the room fills with screams. Every single student breaks down from the transformation. Every one of them, except one. His name is Yehi, and he just sits there completely still like nothing's happening. The teacher writes him off, too weak to handle it. Body rejected the serum, but then a shockwave of raw energy detonates around him, hurling the other students across the room. Yehi has awakened, and whatever's inside him is vicious. Later, each student goes through a gene identification scan to find out what kind of beast they've inherited. When Yehi steps up, everyone's waiting to see something massive. The device picks up nothing. Laughter ripples through the hall. They figure his inner beast is so pathetically weak it doesn't even register. What nobody knows is that Yehi has quietly unlocked something almost unheard of, the ability to awaken multiple beast forms, something no one has ever seen before. His system flags him as someone with the potential to become the king of monsters. Yehi requested a leave of absence to study at home, intending to return stronger. The teacher, however, showed no confidence in the boy and advised him to prepare to repeat the year. The boy insisted, explaining that he had awakened a powerful bloodline and promised to do his utmost. Faced with his determination, the teacher finally granted permission. With the leave in hand, Yehi began to map out his evolution plans. He had a sum of money, obtained from selling his house after his parents' death, and his monster, Demora, had many skill points to distribute. He deduced that these extra points came from the serum he had used, so he decided to invest all his money in the substance, considering it a more efficient path to evolution than exhaustive training. Upon arriving at the warrior's center, Yehi was surprised by the sheer number of people who had awakened their own monsters. One of Demora's abilities was the perception of these creatures' auras, and he could feel the presence of them all. Suddenly, a fury originating from his monster began to swell within him, but he was brought back to reality by a touch on his shoulder. It was a girl with remarkable charisma, to whom Yehi revealed his interest in buying the serum. The girl found the request strange, seeing as he was a novice, and warned him about the possible side effects. Yehi was even more surprised, almost fainting when he learned the beginner's vial cost 400,000. Even so, he asked if there was any way to get a discount. In response, the girl gave him her contact information, making the boy very happy. He spent all his money, buying and using a large amount of serum. Feeling strong enough, he decided it was time to explore a secret realm, a type of dimension filled with monsters and classified by ranks from E to S. He headed to an E-rank secret realm, which was completely empty as it had already been extensively explored. Standing before the dimensional rift, he felt that this was the first step toward achieving his ultimate goal. As soon as he jumped into the portal, while walking, he was attacked by a rabbit with sharp fangs. He eliminated the creature effortlessly and discovered it was worth about 1,000 wan. Unsatisfied, Yehi decided to look for rank 2 beasts, which would be a greater challenge. It wasn't long before a worm appeared in front of him, exactly what he needed to test his new strength. Yehi used his skills to confront the creature, which fired fangs at him. He dodged quickly, but was annoyed to find the attack had torn his expensive jacket. He then realized he couldn't use his full power due to the lack of training in the body he now inhabited. To compensate, he decided to cheat, activating the demonic emperor's bloodline through the Demora. With his amplified strength, he attacked the worm without hesitation and defeated it completely. After the battle, Yehi noticed his sword had been destroyed by the creature's poison, and he felt an intense hunger from expending so much energy on a level 2 monster. Suddenly, a delicious scent caught his attention. The reward was a green magic core that exuded an alluring fragrance. Impulsively, he ate the core and felt his compatibility with the Demora increase. He was shocked to realize that the cores were far more effective at increasing his power than the expensive potions he had bought. Regretting the wasted money, Yehi decided to spend the rest of the night hunting as many monsters as he could. The next day, he left the rift with enhanced compatibility and a few cores to sell, which left the receptionist impressed by the number of rewards the rookie had collected. Sometime later, a group was preparing to explore a rank D rift, but one of the adventurers had been injured. Yehi seized the opportunity to get some extra work and introduced himself as Pasla, using a fake identity since he was underage and couldn't officially participate in missions of that level. The group's leader accepted but instructed him to just observe, stating that the best way to help would be to not get in the way. Thus, the group set off in search of the bloody jade flower, located in an oasis protected by rank 2 monsters. Along the way, they were attacked by demonic rats, but one of the adventurers, named Hood, quickly eliminated the creatures with his daggers, leaving Yehi impressed by his skill. They proceeded on foot, and the leader explained that the noise of an engine could attract the oasis's monsters. Next, he assigned tasks to each team member and reinforced to Yehi that he should remain silent and not interfere. To initiate the plan, a grenade was thrown to lure out the first sand dragon. However, the explosion not only attracted the monster, but also caught the attention of a bald, threatening-looking man. Captain Lin defeated the dragon, but a claw immediately lunged at him. Without hesitation, action, Yi He eliminated the new beast, leaving the other adventurers speechless at his skill and earning the group's trust. After the fight, they collected the dragon's soul essence, which looked like a mango pit. As the captain celebrated the reward and the flower's capture, he was stabbed in the back by Hood. The adventurers cried out for their captain in despair, as the traitor joined a bald, gangster-like man named Huo Peng, known for stealing artifacts collected by other groups. Wounded, Lin questioned how Huo Peng had found the flower's location, since he had only revealed it to the group once they entered the rift. Yi He realized and explained that Hood had left the coordinates behind when he threw his daggers at the desert rats. The traitor, finding the boy clever, threw a dagger at him, but Yi He, with incredible reflexes, stopped the weapon and decided it was time to end this game. The bald gangster then ordered Hood to kill the hero. Hood launched a multiple attack, which was easily repelled by Yi He. Next, the traitor attempted a stealth attack, which became the perfect opportunity for the young man to test his new skill, hitting the enemy squarely. The display of power made Captain Lin doubt whether the boy was truly a novice. Outraged, Huo Peng also demanded to know which family Yi He belonged to. The young man revealed he was from the Demon clan, which made the gangster promptly activate his bear monster power. Huo Peng grew dozens of times his size and leaped at Yi He, who didn't move a muscle. To avoid being crushed, he attacked his opponent's legs. The bear tried to strike him, but Yi He dodged with incredible speed and annihilated the giant with a meteor shower. The man fell, deflated like a balloon, leaving the adventurers in shock. Before being completely defeated, Huo Peng swore that Yi He's demon would be punished for its wickedness, and cursed him. From the young man's look, it was clear this was neither the first nor the last curse he would receive. The day of the university entrance exam, which was conducted through duels, had arrived. An excited announcer wished luck to the future protectors of humanity, and the matches began in various arenas. However, in Arena 6, the protagonist had not yet appeared, leaving his opponent, a popular girl from his class, frustrated at not being able to show off her power. The judge was about to end the match and declare a victory by default when the professors sensed a powerful aura approaching like a comet. Yi He made a dramatic entrance in the middle of the arena. His opponent barely had time to react before taking a direct kick to the face, falling to the ground unconscious. The fight ended so quickly that Yi He himself was frustrated it hadn't lasted longer. The crowd, however, erupted at the spectacular display. The young man felt strengthened by the effect of the jade blood flower, which he had received as a thank you from Captain Lin. The matches continued, and Yi He won another fight effortlessly, and then another, leaving the audience increasingly thrilled with his performance. With his surprising performance, the protagonist was approached by recruiters from several universities. Arrogantly, the young man stated he was going to the capital's university, and his arrogance drove the interested parties away. He, however, remained confident that he could win the tournament. Suddenly, some men in suits approached to reassess his martial level. The assessor was intrigued by Yi He's growth, as he had jumped from level 3 to 9 in such a short time. The young man explained that he had trained intensely for the past 3 months, and, as a result, had managed to break through his genetic lock. The men were petrified by the revelation, and left in a hurry to report the incident. Seeing their reaction, Yi He thought that perhaps he had said too much. While many parents were sending messages of support to their children, he had no one to support him, feeling lonely. Far away, however, his teacher was cheering with all his might in front of the television. In the qualifiers, Yi He would face Luo Xuan, a level 8 opponent with a bestial lineage, considered by many to be a formidable adversary. The fight began with Luo advancing with his claws, but Yi He very calmly parried the blow with his hand. He noted that the impact was far weaker than Huo Peng's attacks in the desert. Without mercy, he crushed Luo Xuan's hand and then delivered a devastating blow that sent his opponent sinking into the arena floor. Yi He then concluded that no one there was a match for him. The excited crowd shared Yi He's sense of superiority as he watched Luo Xuan being carried out of the arena. Meanwhile, at the capital's university, scouts were already pulling up the fighters' complete file. In another arena, however, an intense fight was unfolding between Kai Shaoling, known as the Queen and number 2 of Ansheng School, and Liu Qingzhu, the untouchable flower and number 1 of the same institution. The blonde competitor advanced mercilessly, but the brunette blocked the attack with her magic. She suddenly trapped Xiaoling's hand, delivering a powerful punch that sent the announcer into a frenzy. In response, the school's number 2 invoked her tiger form and charged forward as if hunting prey. Qingzhu, unintimidated, used another of her family's secret techniques, but the tigress countered with a special kick of her own. Their energies collided, producing a massive hurricane of light. When the smoke cleared, Kai Shaoling emerged from the mist, only to suddenly collapse. Qingzhu remained standing, the victor of the match. Shortly after, the draw for the quarterfinals took place. Yi He drew a ball with the letter A and discovered his opponent would be a massive man named Shen Jiaguan. Despite his appearance, he seemed quite relaxed and even invited Yi He to watch the next fight with him. Together, they watched as Chu Zhou from Yi He's own school won his match, leaving the rival school's headmaster distraught. Yi He asked the big man if he could beat the student who had just lost, since they were from the same school. Shen Zheguan modestly remarked that, as class president, he could take on that fighter and 3 others at the same time without any trouble. He confessed, however, that he saw Yi He as the real one to beat, sensing the young man was like a dormant volcano. Finally, it was time for their fight. The fight started out evenly matched, but after his nose began to bleed, Shen created a nuclear radiation shield, surprising Yi He with its sheer power. The larger fighter then invoked an ancestral power that blended the forms of a snake and a deer, a combination so unusual that Yi He briefly pondered its strangeness before being hit for the first time in the entire tournament. Shen attacked again, this time with the spirit of the bear. As he blocked the blow, Yi He realized this fight would be much harder than he had imagined. He was then caught in a rear naked choke that nearly crushed him. However, Shen seemed to be just toying with him, as he threw his opponent and pursued him like a cat hunting its prey, finishing with an attack called the Eagle's Dive, from which Yi He had no chance to defend himself. The medics were already preparing to enter the arena when Shen felt an absurd aura of power coming from behind him. For the first time, Yi He had assumed the form closest to the Demora, which frightened the big guy, as he knew this ability was the entry requirement for the capital's academy. The director was incredulous at the immense amount of nuclear radiation emanating from the protagonist in his beast form. This display of power, however, worried the examiners, since the arena had specific safeguards against energy leaks. Oblivious to the danger, the crowd celebrated Yi He's strength. Shen felt blood run from his own nose and decided to prepare a combination attack, using the power of several animals. Yi He, in turn, waited for his adversary to approach and counterattacked with full force, nearly tearing off the giant opponent's arm. Fueled by the rage of his transformation, the protagonist decided it was time to strike back. Yi He lunged with his claws but was caught off guard by Shen's block. When the brute got on his back, he nearly crushed him again. The protagonist focused all his strength, but before he could deliver the blow, he was stunned by Shen Jiaguan's surrender. The unexpected surrender left Yi He frustrated, as he couldn't unleash his full power, and he ended up reverting to his original form. The crowd went wild with another of his victories and showed Shen no mercy, quickly creating memes of his surrender to share on messaging apps. While the hero's performance went viral on social media, the director of Shen's academy was furious with the defeat. However, the brute approached the director and warned him to calm down, threatening to turn him into ground meat. Faced with the threat, the older man immediately settled down. With that, the semifinals were set, featuring 3 students from Ancheng, which made the director of the other school very proud. In the draw for the first match, Yi He was slated to face the powerful Liu Qingju. The audience was thrilled, as both fighters possessed an enviable beast-like aura. With the arena set for the clash, they presented themselves before the referee, who started the duel. As his first move, Yi He released a gas so foul it almost made the girl pass out from the smell. The smoke, however, did not dissipate and lingered around the protagonist. Despite this, Liu Qingju readied herself for combat. The audience complained about the amount of smoke, while the announcer tried to entertain them. In truth, Yi He had created the situation to buy time and think of a strategy, as he knew Liu was more powerful, and any misstep would result in his defeat. So, he decided to attack first. The fighter tried to block the strike, but was caught off guard by her opponent's sudden change in movement and had to dodge quickly. However, Yi He was relentless, forcing the girl to retreat as best she could, which made the Demora within him grow ever more furious. Liu was surprised by the sheer number of Yi He's attacks, as he showed no sign of fatigue. Faced with this, she decided to use her lineage's secret techniques and awakened immense wings, revealing her magical beast for the first time, the Nether Bird. Then, she warned Yi He that she wouldn't be responsible for her beast's power. The warning pleased the boy, as this meant he could also use the full power of his own beast. This time, it was Liu who tried to catch Yi He off guard, but he quickly counterattacked. When their strikes collided, the audience felt the incredible force of the impact. The smoke finally dissipated, revealing a petrified Liu Qingju. She was in shock, as Yi He's fury and power seemed to have tripled. Yi He focused all his energy into the spikes on his back and suddenly expelled it from his mouth using the atomic energy beam technique. The attack surged forward, sweeping away everything in its path, and Liu Qingju's only option was to protect herself with a deflection of feathers. Even so, the effect was catastrophic, scattering beams across the arena toward the audience. The energy beams were repelled by Huang Qing, the mayor of An, who seized the moment to declare that those present would witness the birth of the strongest champion the city had ever seen. Meanwhile, in the arena, Liu Qingju was reeling from the attack, in disbelief that her block had been shattered. Before she could even think of giving up, the girl had a vision of her ancestors speaking to her. Her mother, dressed in black, insisted that her daughter should put on a crop top and fight back. However, Yi He was a very powerful opponent, so the girl decided to go for an all-or-nothing attack. This time, however, Yi He didn't dodge. Liu was confused, until he stared at her with a demonic gaze and fearlessly unleashed his own blow, demanding that she fight for real. The girl could only hide her face, indignant, for she had never taken such a beating in her life. Finally, Liu Qingju unleashed all her fury. Yi was pleased to see the fighter truly awaken, and she then decided she would reveal her true inner beast to win the battle. Yi did the same and charged at his opponent, who, to show she meant business, created a tornado and then unleashed a powerful scream she called an atomic breath. However, Yi blocked the attack and began to focus energy into the spikes on his back. The two then unleashed their ultimate powers once more, leaving the judging panel worried about the outcome of the impact. The sinister mayor stepped in again, creating walls to absorb the energy. Suddenly, the barrier cracked, and the audience was surprised to realize that if it weren't for that protection, they all would have been hit. The man, for his part, admitted to himself that he hadn't expected such strong candidates that year. After the clash of powers, Liu Qingzhu was at her limit, while Yi seemed unscathed before the girl, who claimed she didn't wish to fight him. Yi crouched down and replied that he didn't believe a word of it. Liu hesitated, but deep down, she truly wanted to defeat him. Then, Yi placed his hand on her shoulder and released a powerful surge of energy, which absorbed all the radiation imbued in Liu Qingzhu's body. He confessed that she was the strongest opponent he had ever faced, and hoped that in their next encounter, she would give it her all. And so, the protagonist was declared the winner of the first semi-final. The final duel would be decided between Yi and Chuzhou, who were from the same school. To start the fight, Chuzhou drew an energy sword, while Yi simply smiled and casually invited him to attack. Chuzhou took the initiative, but his opponent didn't move a muscle to block. Instead, he unleashed an atomic punch that destroyed all the clones he had projected. Realizing his chances were slim, Chuzhou invoked his ice technique in an attempt to tire Yi out. An iceberg advanced across the entire arena, freezing the protagonist. However, the ice soon began to melt, and Chuzhou was outraged at how easily Yi broke free from it. Faced with this, he decided to use his most dangerous technique. The clash resulted in a minor injury to Yi's hand, while Chuzhou's sword was completely shattered. Without hesitation, his opponent forfeited the match. The crowd went wild, cheering for the winner. Yi's image spread throughout the city, establishing him as the strongest winner in the history of the entrance exam. In the middle of the arena, the announcer congratulated the protagonist, who made a point of thanking his teacher for believing in him, leaving the man, who was watching from home, deeply moved. From the stands, the principal desperately pleaded to be mentioned as well. To secure a 10 million scholarship, Yi gave the school some well-deserved promotion. Finally, he took the microphone and thanked himself, stating that if a person doesn't love themselves, no one else will. Suddenly, the system also announced a reward for him for having achieved the goal of becoming the #1 fighter. After the ceremony, Yi was desperately trying to escape the paparazzi, who were already speculating about his possible relationships with the girls from school. He finally found the empty gym, a quiet place where he could inspect his new abilities. However, his peace was interrupted by a mysterious detective-like man who congratulated him on his victory. The man introduced himself as being from Huadu College and said he was interested in discussing a problem with the boy's genetic trait, which intrigued Yi, although he was certain his abilities came from Demora. The man asked if Yi knew anything about his father's genetic traits and pulled an envelope from his briefcase, revealing a secret about the man he had only known as a simple taxi driver. Yi learned about the Prometheus project, which dealt with genetic traits, and that after an incident, the researchers involved were forced to hide their identities. He then deduced that his father was one of those researchers, and that he himself was nothing more than an experiment. The man, however, reassured him, stating that everything was under control, and that although Yi didn't seem worried, the college wanted to protect him. After the man left, Yi decided to focus on organizing the plans for his bright future. He started the system to discover his new skill model, and was perplexed to find a vortex. From it, a sinister D-rank monster emerged, named the Giant Humanoid. Seeing the new creature, Yi had the idea of merging his two monsters to become the king of all monsters. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a serious-looking man was on the phone, stating that he would cancel all his appointments. His priority was to find out what happened to his brother, who had disappeared into a rift, and he felt guilty for not having protected him as he had promised his mother. His search gained a new focus when he saw Yi on television and became interested in the prodigy. Back to Yi, he received a letter from Chuzhou, inviting him to investigate a C-rank rift discovered by Huadu. The boy wondered, indignant, why he hadn't just sent a text message. At Red Tree Mountain, several fighters were already watching the new rift form. There, Yi met Chuzhou, who noticed that the boy seemed stronger, unaware that he had received a huge power boost. Yi found out they would both be going to the same college and thought Chuzhou was a bit strange. The conversation was cut short when the rift finally opened and a sinister monster emerged to welcome them. Excited, one of the fighters urged the group to attack the beast. The monster, startled by the advancing crowd, tried to retreat, but was quickly slain. Then the warriors entered the rift, where Yi smelled the strong scent of blood. Soon, monsters of all kinds emerged, and the warriors, without hesitation, charged into battle, showcasing the skills they had honed at school. As Chuzhou swung his sword, Yi saved him from a monster attacking from behind. He was impressed, watching his friend effortlessly slay creature after creature. Shortly after, a signal indicated that the leader of the beasts had been defeated. While Chuzhou was taking stock of their losses, Yi He appeared with a heavy load of monster cores and asked for help carrying them. Chuzhou then lent him his subspace storage ring. Just then, they saw other warriors approaching, among them a burly man who had helped them during the fight. The warrior, curious about Yi He, introduced himself as Wu Sen and offered him an S-rank contract to join his group, the Silver Wolf. The offer drew envious looks from the others, as the group was extremely renowned. Next, a woman riding a tiger from the Chengda group also invited Yi He to join them, offering 15% of their monthly haul. The other warriors reacted with astonishment, remarking on how generous the offer was. However, Yi He refused both offers, explaining that he wasn't interested in working with a group. The leaders accepted his decision and said they would wait for another opportunity. Later, Chuzhou and Yi He climbed to the top of a peak. From there, as the wind blew, they spotted some giants picking what looked like roses, although there were no rose bushes in the area. Yi He commented that he couldn't wait to be strong enough to face them, but Chuzhou wished he would never have to cross paths with those beasts. Finally, Yi He sensed life elsewhere in that world and pointed to a lake, suggesting they go investigate. When they arrived, Yi He recognized Yuli, who was hunting with her group. The girl explained that 2 of her teammates were diving. Shortly after, one of them emerged excitedly, announcing he had found a relic. Yi He asked about the group's excitement, and Chuzhou clarified that in that area, there were ancient structures that held very valuable items. The diver who found the item, upon seeing the newcomers, wanted to eliminate the witnesses, but Yuli stopped him, telling her friend that Yi He and Chuzhou were there to help. The man, named Yu Yang, was annoyed at the thought of sharing the reward. To resolve the impasse, Yi He suggested their payment be based solely on productivity. With the deal struck, the group set off to explore the submerged ruins. Once underwater, a suspicious Yu Yang noticed that his other friend was not waiting for him at the agreed-upon spot. He tried to contact him by radio, but got no response, which made the group hesitant to continue. Even so, Yu Yang stated he wouldn't give up on collecting the relics, and they all decided to press on through the cave. Noticing strange footprints, Chuzhou had a bad feeling. He whispered that he smelled a trap and suggested they turn back, but he was curious to see what would happen. They moved forward and reached a place filled with the cores of dead monsters, entangled in sinister plants. Suddenly, they spotted the other diver, Li Wei, also trapped and being devoured by the vines. Yuli was frightened by the scene, while Yu Yang despaired upon realizing the relics had vanished. Suddenly, Yu Yang began to mutate, and several roots sprouted from his head. A beam of light cut through the darkness. It was Yi He who quickly eliminated the monster that had possessed Yu Yang. He was surprised by the creature's intelligence, using its victims as bait to lure more prey to its lair. To make matters worse, their way back was blocked. While Yuli looked terrified, Yi He felt motivated to destroy the enemy. It was then that, from the rocks, another higher-level warrior emerged, determined to eliminate them. Despite the situation, Yi He was already getting used to being pursued. The warrior who had cornered them explained that he had tracked Yi He's footsteps through the radiation left in the realm of the Red Tree Mountains. He revealed he was the one who had blocked the path, seeking to avenge the death of his brother, Ho Peng. Yi He was unimpressed by the man and thought he was talking too much. Uninterested in talking, the enemy launched his attack, but felt his energy being drained by Yi He's demonic branches. In response, he unleashed his full power, causing the cave to start collapsing, much to Yuli's despair. Yi He, however, used his power to hold back the falling rocks, and ordered the girl and her group to leave the area immediately. The adversary took advantage of the distraction to attack with full force, but was stopped by a sword-shaped bolt. It was Chuzhou who had arrived and used his blade to help Yi He. With the enemy momentarily dazed, Yi He seized the opportunity to launch his atomic strike. He then suggested that Chuzhou fall back, as their opponent was extremely powerful. Outside, the other warriors watched the lake churn strangely until Chuzhou emerged alone, leaving Yuli worried about Yi He's fate. Shortly after, however, a giant humanoid monster rose from the water and annihilated the enemy with nuclear energy. When the smoke cleared, Yi He reappeared in his normal form and asked for some clothes so as not to frighten the others. With the situation resolved, Yi He explained that the enemy had used a plasma bomb, and Chuzhou commented that such weaponry was forbidden. The boy also swore he had seen a giant, but Yi He insisted it was just his friend's imagination and told him to forget about it, as he didn't want to reveal his second monster model. Yuli said her goodbyes, thanking Yi He for his help, and he decided he would go hunt more monsters. Later, the pair went to the entrance of the Red Tree Mountain realm, but were astonished to find the place had turned into a trading town. Upon reaching an exchange counter, Yi nearly destroyed it with his heavy bag of items. When he started taking out all the items he had stored in Chuzhou's subspace ring, the receptionist nearly fell out of her chair at the sheer amount of materials. Yi simply asked her to calculate the value quickly, as he had a lot of medicine to buy. The staff at the core appraisal center was impressed by the rarity of the items. Yi didn't mind selling them, as the white and green magic cores had no effect on him, but he made sure to keep the ones he considered important for future use. With that, he left the place with a lot of money and quite satisfied. However, his contentment was cut short when a car screeched to a halt in front of him. A man named Yutian, the owner of Pinghe Pharmacy, got out of the vehicle and expressed his desire to buy all of his cores. Yi was curious as to how news about him spread so quickly. He ended up accumulating a bit more money from the sale, but the total amount still wasn't enough to increase his strength as he wished, as the creature accompanying him had a rather demanding diet. Faced with this, he came up with an idea to meet his needs and decided to focus on learning martial skills. Yi then went to visit the school director, who received him with much praise and formality. Being equally cordial, the young man offered a medicinal wine to the older man, who was delighted with the gift. Yi took the opportunity to ask for the director's help, requesting a recommendation for someone who could teach him martial arts, as he needed to get stronger. The man readily agreed to help the young man. The next day, as he was getting out of a hot bath, Yi was surprised to be informed by the director that the Liu family had offered to teach him. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, a motorcycle was speeding through the streets. The young blonde woman on the back was impressed by the skills of the rider, a young man named Jai. Unexpectedly, Yi pulled up alongside them on his bicycle and warned him about his speeding. Ji was shocked as the young man had appeared out of nowhere. To show off, he decided to accelerate even more, leaving Yi behind. However, Yi used one of his skills and injected a powerful energy into his bicycle, effortlessly overtaking the modified motorcycle, while Jai and his companion watched, jaws agape, as the young man disappeared into the distance. Upon arriving at the Liu family mansion, Yi sensed the presence of very powerful beings on the premises. When he entered the house, a slightly embarrassed young woman named Qingju greeted him and guided him to the great hall. There stood Qin Lan, Liu's mother, who, with a commanding presence, welcomed the newcomer. Yi was impressed and mentally agreed with an old saying by Minister Cao Cao about the woman's beauty. After her defeat in battle, Liu tried to justify herself to her powerful mother, Qin Lan. However, her mother understood the reason for her daughter's defeat after watching a video of the fight. Even so, she reminded the girl that with such a weak younger brother, Liu was the only one who could carry on the family's legacy. Qin Lan then pressured her daughter to use her beauty to find a good match and marry someone who could preserve that heritage. To Liu's surprise, the chosen one was Yi He. On the day of his visit, Yi He had brought a gift to make a good impression on his hostess. Being direct, Qin Lan informed him that her daughter would be in charge of teaching him. Yi He was a little surprised, as the offer seemed too good to be true. However, the mother explained that there were 3 supreme martial arts, and that learning them would depend solely on his effort. Yi consented, showing his gratitude, and Qin Lan liked how the young man showed his commitment to the family. The way they looked at each other suggested there was a spark between them. As they headed to the first day of training, Yi asked Qingju why she was avoiding him, but the girl denied it. He moved closer to her to see if she was telling the truth, but she promptly moved away, as the temptation was strong. They stopped before a special gate that led to the secret realms, and Yi felt the urge to punch the structure, out of sheer curiosity. Qingju allowed it, though she found his attitude rather strange. Without hesitation, Yi prepared to strike the massive rock. The scene reminded Qingju of the fight they had. However, the punch failed to chip even a sliver off the gate, which drew a light laugh from the girl. Qingju guided Yi into the pavilion, explaining that each fighting style required an identification card. He wanted to know about the supreme martial arts, but she thought it best to start with the basics. Faced with his insistence, Qingju opened a black stone door where these arts were kept. She explained that her family had been protecting those skills for generations. Next, they observed the chests that contained the teachings. Qingju revealed that to learn the martial arts, one had to feel them as if they were alive. Yi, however, didn't pay much attention to the explanation, eager to start learning everything. So Qingju opened one of the chests. To his surprise, Yi noticed that inside there wasn't an instruction manual but a statue. Yi began to understand what it meant to feel the martial mark. Qingju explained that the secret of the ancient masters was the ability to infuse this mark into any object. She then challenged him to recognize them on his own, stating that if it were his destiny, he would be able to learn them by himself. Not knowing exactly what to do, Yi lay down before the statue, hoping to receive some kind of divine sign. Meanwhile, Qingju was watching him through a security camera. It was then that the system blessed him with a spiritual body. Immediately, a spirit emerged, declaring that only a true man could learn its techniques. The hero was petrified when he realized the figure was identical to the statue. The spirit proposed a deal. If Yi protected Bodhisattva from the evil spirits, he could learn one of its skills. Yi realized that the rain that began to fall was the sign that the test had begun. He then unsheathed his sword before the demons and prepared to prove his worth, striking at the advancing spirits. Meanwhile, the spiritual being watched the fight, thinking the young man was just another fool who would be easily defeated. However, it was surprised to notice that the evil spirits couldn't even touch him. He understood that the system was protecting him in that spiritual world and was pleased to have an invincible body there. The statue's spirit tried to understand how the young man was unaffected by the martial marks effect, but Yi simply explained that he was a very diligent student. The ancestor decided to fulfill its promise and grant him a skill that was inside a well. However, as it began to explain the evil in the flesh technique, Yi jumped into the well without waiting to hear what the spirit had to say. The spirit was shocked by the young man's audacity, but it understood that he was different. It remembered that when it too was a hero, it lived dangerously, using that same technique to destroy S-rank monsters. However, with continuous use of the skill, it had slowly gone mad, causing the deaths of many people around it. For that reason, it decided to die, transferring its martial mark to the statue. The evil spirits, however, had followed it, and only by defeating them could someone become worthy of using the evil in the flesh skill. In the control room, a mother and daughter were watching Yi's performance. Qingju was dumbfounded, as his body in the physical plane was already showing signs that he was completing the first test. However, Qingju found it strange. The young man, who at first wore an expression of satisfaction, was now in unusual agony. Qinlan explained that in the final days of his life, the girl's grandfather had tried to absorb the statue's abilities, and having failed was severely injured. Suddenly, she was startled to see the boy wake up peacefully on the ship after the test. Qingju was happy, as he seemed fine. Yi felt grateful to the statue for entrusting him with the responsibility of discovering the truth about the secret realms. Even though he had cheated on the test, he was satisfied to obtain the evil incarnate skill, which practically doubled his power. Mother and daughter went to the chamber, and Qinlan was intrigued by the speed with which the boy had accomplished such a feat. In response, Yi decided to give a small demonstration of how to use the skill, leaving Qingju awestruck by the aura the power projected around him. Her proud mother was nearly moved to tears. Qingju asked if Yi wanted to learn any other techniques, but her mother inwardly disapproved of her daughter for offering the family's treasures so easily to the young man. Noticing the older woman's expression, Yi decided to stop there. Qinlan then offered the boy one of the family's cars, but he thought a motorcycle would be more interesting. Meanwhile, Ji was walking back through the mansion, eager to meet the strong man who would help the family, and hoping never again to run into the man on the bicycle he had seen earlier. His walk was interrupted when Yi sped past him on a motorcycle, nearly sending him spinning. Jai was startled to recognize the young man on one of his motorcycles. Back home, Yi was eating his cores in sauce, increasing his attributes. Because of this, he decided to upgrade his giant monster model to make it even bigger. However, upon ingesting the plant cores from the demonic branch, a genetic mutation became available for Demora. Yi grew thoughtful, pondering whether or not to enable the mutation, but decided to take the risk to see the result. The genetic modification was initiated, with the promise that as soon as Demora reached 100% of the wild trait, it would transform into the star of the universe. Yi was overjoyed with the evolution, until a light from outside the window interrupted his good mood. The military was all over the street, putting Yi on alert for a possible invasion of his apartment. He tried to dismiss the idea, as the body's previous owner rarely had visitors, but then he suddenly saw a strange woman appear on his windowsill. The intruder looked annoyed that she had failed to make a surprise entrance. With little patience for pleasantries, Yi pointed his finger at her. Outside, the police had found who they were looking for, but the man was unwilling to hand over the golden gene. He decided to sacrifice himself to cover for his partner, Yao Mei, but she ended up falling beside him, looking like a comet. Her companion Zhou Yi thought she was so burned she looked like a piece of charcoal. Even so, the woman reported that she had already completed her mission. Then they set off a smoke bomb and fled through the sewer. Just when the pair thought they had escaped, Yi appeared, demanding to know why his home had been invaded. Zhou Yi was outraged that they had been discovered. Meanwhile, Yi scanned his enemies' auras and, eager to test his new ability, attacked them. The man had no time to defend himself, and the armored woman's eyes widened at Yi's technique. In response, her partner transformed into a rhinoceros and, in a show of strength, charged forward to gore him. He was starting to enjoy the situation when the woman tried to attack him from behind. He repelled her with a flick of impressive force and told her to leave. Frustrated by his partner's failure, Zhou Yi became furious and charged at Yi with everything he had. As he counterattacked, Yi didn't expect the enemy's defense to have increased so much. With that, the rhinoceros monster felt ready to finish him off. However, Yi had escaped the monster's line of sight and suddenly reappeared, transformed into an imposing creature that brutally overpowered the rhinoceros. The sight made Yao Mei regret confronting him, but she didn't back down. Using a molecular wire, she wrapped it around the giant's neck and managed to tear off its head. Yao Mei sighed in relief, believing her plan had worked, but the last thing she saw was a bright, infinite light. Yi He emerged from the smoke and found Zhou Yi gravely wounded. Determined to finish him off once and for all, he approached. Before dying, Zhou Yi revealed that Yao Mei had hidden the golden gene in Yi He's house, ensuring he would be hunted forever. After hearing the revelation, Yi He finished off his enemy and decided to clean up the mess before the police arrived, but he realized the damage was too great. Back home, Yi He was relieved to learn that his Aunt Qin had handled the situation with the police. He then focused on understanding what this golden gene was. Upon examining the container, he recognized the symbol as the same one from the Prometheus file he had received from his Huadu contact. He deduced that the pair had stolen the item from Laserbird, a biotechnology company. With his house destroyed, Yi He decided to move into a hotel, taking care not to leave any clues behind. In Swan Lake's secret realm, a group of warriors was on a sweep when they noticed a wave of monsters approaching, commanded by the supreme blood-eyed beast. The warriors decided to flee to inform the authorities, but the creature did not intend to let them escape. It let out a scream that hurled stones, crushing the men before they could finish their distress call over the radio. The beast then sent all its monsters toward the rift. When the news reached the population, they fell into despair, and the military rushed to the scene as quickly as they could. Meanwhile, the authorities summoned all available warriors to the battle. Worried, the mayor wished that Huadu would send a master to assist them. However, the organization in the neighboring city was also under attack by S-rank monsters. Therefore, An's politician could only rely on his own forces to protect the territory. Yi He was training with Chuzhou when they both received the alert. The pair then decided to join the defense. Meanwhile, Lu Qingzhu was forbidden from joining the battle by her mother, who cared more about the family's legacy. Frustrated and indignant, the girl left the room. Qinlan then ordered her housekeeper to prepare the family's evacuation to another city. She also instructed the housekeeper to send a message to Yi He, believing the time had come to test the young man's loyalty. On that day, even the veteran warriors gathered in the secret realm to defend their city. With strength and determination, they guided the younger ones against the enemies. Meanwhile, the armed forces positioned themselves strategically at the entrance of the rift, and the mayor held on to the hope that his men would return alive. The situation changed when a heavily wounded warrior returned, carrying a flash drive that contained all the information from the battle. He warned the people to be careful, but immediately after, a rock was hurled through the rift toward the city, damaging one of the buildings. As it crumbled, the structure sent debris falling onto the explosive mines placed by the government, which triggered a massive explosion. In response, the mayor ordered them to fire at the portal and watched with curiosity as the beast used war strategies. Then came another shower of rocks and the battle raged both inside and outside the portal. Suddenly, the monsters began to pour out, and the soldiers proved to be no match for them in close quarters combat. The monster leader was certain that the humans would not hold out for long. A giant troll came through the portal and, in a devastating attack, began to wipe out the soldiers while being shot at. It was at that moment that Yi He arrived at the scene of the confrontation. Determined not to let the monsters destroy the city that had taken him in, he leaped onto the creatures, consumed by an uncontrollable rage. His school friends were already in the fight, giving it their all. Chuzhou felt a surge of pride seeing generations of warriors fighting together until a tank was hurled in his direction. However, he effortlessly split the vehicle in half with his sword. Young Xiaoling was stunned by the troll's sheer size as it swung its sledgehammer to crush the heroes, but its blow was blocked by the arrival of Yi He. The newcomer positioned himself over the monster's mouth and attacked, driven by the creature's unbearable breath. Seeing this, Luo Xin thought the beasts were fighting each other, but Chuzhou corrected her, explaining that the smaller one was the city's most promising young man and their greatest hope for victory. Then, Yi He ordered his friends to handle that sector and left to help other humans, until he identified the area with the highest concentration of beasts. Elsewhere in the battle, as their rifles proved ineffective, the soldiers charged with bayonets, but were stopped by the tusk of a mammoth-like monster. A soldier pleaded for a retreat, but the captain ordered them to press on, bravely cutting down a monster with his sword. It was then that everyone saw the spirits of Yi He's technique materialize in a terrifying display, voraciously enveloping the monsters as he attacked with other abilities from the Demora. On the other battlefronts, the warriors realized the monsters were trying to surround Yi He, so they decided to go to his aid, recognizing that he was the only one who could save the city of An. The protagonist was already wreaking havoc on the monsters, while the mayor was also doing his part with his walls. He knew, however, that the war would only end with the elimination of the leader. At one point, a monster managed to break through his defense, but it was easily struck down. However, a huge beast emerged from the portal. The mayor identified it as a high-level crocodile and concluded that the monster leader was on its way. He then faced the creature, unleashing his most potent powers, but was met with earthen spikes that destroyed several city blocks. Luckily, the mayor knew that species of monster well. Noticing the creature hadn't fully emerged from the portal yet, he decided to launch another quick attack. However, the animal was resilient and managed to adapt to the situation. Suddenly, the mayor found himself being stalked by bloodthirsty eyes and was caught by an ape-like creature hidden among the spikes. The monster, determined to wipe out humanity, smashed the mayor into the ground. But before it could deliver the final blow, the monster felt an explosion in its hand, for the mayor would not surrender so easily and had fired another special attack against the beast. However, the ape did not move, certain that humanity could never match its power. It ordered the mayor to bow, but was surprised to find that the man showed no fear. Then, the mayor pulled another trick from his sleeve, trapping the monster lord in rings of light. Outraged at having fallen into the trap, the ape refused to surrender. Even as the rings drained its energy, it swore that as soon as the mayor's power ran out, it would kill everyone without mercy. In response, the man revealed a star-shaped scar on his chest and pulled out his own heart, which contained a device designed to obliterate all enemies. The ape thought the mayor was just bluffing. However, Huang Qing, upon being elected, had promised to protect the city at any cost. Fulfilling his promise, he blew himself up, creating a fiery mushroom cloud in the midst of the battle. Both the soldiers and the warriors present acknowledged the mayor's sacrifice. Everyone watched the explosion as if they were at the funeral for the greatest hero of the city of An. The explosion had almost completely destroyed the monster, but what was left of the creature threatened to recover and return to kill them all. However, the battle was not yet over for Yi He. The protagonist prepared a nuclear attack with his giant mech, which left the opponent in a pitiful state. Then, Yi He's Damora attacked again, hurling the enemy several meters back. Despite the damage, the creature still had the strength to charge at the protagonist. Even torn to shreds, the powerful foe managed to damage Damora's fist. However, the monster realized it stood no chance and tried to flee. Determined to avenge the mayor's death, Yi He wouldn't let it escape and unleashed the Radiant Pulse, destroying the creature once and for all. Despite the previous blow, Yi He sensed the ape was still alive and camouflaged somewhere. A wave of regret washed over him for not arriving in time to help Mayor Huang Qing. Then, he spotted the creature's tracks on the ground and hit it with a blast of nuclear energy. However, the great ape still had the strength to conjure a sphere of fire, charging at him with all its remaining energy. Yi He blocked the strike and finally shattered the monster. A moment later, though, he felt something daze him. He noticed several hands emerging to carry the creature's body, and to his surprise, realized that hands were also beginning to sprout from his own joints. Realizing it was an enemy technique, Yi He raised his body temperature to over 1,000 degrees, beginning to incinerate the hands that held him. Meanwhile, the ape's body was already near the entrance of a rift when a bizarre head emerged to guide the hands, shielding them before Yi He's power could reach them. Faced with the scene, Yi He watched, wondering if that might be the true form of the ape lord. The monster's scream still had Yi He dazed, but he wasn't about to show any mercy after the havoc they had wreaked on the city. Gathering his power, he unleashed a devastating beam, and everyone around watched as both the monsters and the rift vanished completely. As paramedics began to tend to the wounded, Chuojo knew that with such heavy losses, this could hardly be called a victory. In the crater where the rift once was, Yi He was recovering and realized that, despite his monster's power, it was no match for a sovereign beast like the monkey. Faced with this realization, he decided he needed to gather as many cores as possible to fuse more monsters and achieve ultimate power. A month after the massacre, a statue of the mayor was erected in the city square. News circulated of numerous attacks taking place across the country, including the confirmed death of Fu Musheng, the kingdom's greatest martial artist. Genuinely worried, Yi He decided to ask his aunt, Qinlan, for help. The woman, who was resting peacefully, presumed he wanted access to the family's other Xuanhuang manuals, but the young man clarified that he only needed help collecting plant cores. Since those lord-level cores cost a fortune, Qinlan wanted to know what she would get in return. Yi He then promised to help Liu Qingju take the top spot at Huadu College. Still, Qinlan decided to test him, underestimating his ability. Aware of his importance to her, Yi He vowed that he would serve the Liu family forever should he fail in his promise. At such an offer, his aunt was so thrilled that she even lifted her foot and accepted the daring proposal. Yi He went to the hospital to visit the wounded warriors, but upon arriving, he was surrounded by a crowd trying to get close to him. At Chujo's bedside, he joked with his friend, who was so bandaged up he looked like a mummy. Luo-san was also in the same room, but Yi He didn't remember the young man he had fought in the tournament. Luo-san had lost a leg during the invasion, but was handling the situation well, which earned him Yi He's respect for his bravery. Suddenly, Yi He's cell phone rang. It was a call from Wang Tao, from the college admissions office. Before this, the school principal had been angry because Yi He had blocked the number of an important person from Huadu. Upon answering, Yi He was informed by Wang Tao that a train would come to pick him up in a few days. Chujo also received a call from the college, while Luo-san felt frustrated for not having secured a spot at a top-tier university. In the days that followed, Yi He continued to visit the battle site to train. The explosion had created a curtain of smoke that wouldn't dissipate, and training there significantly increased his compatibility with the abode. However, he had to stop his training, as the day to leave for college had arrived. At the station, Chuzhou was already waiting for the train when Yi He arrived, his appearance causing a stir among the people present. His friend noticed that he seemed to have grown even stronger. The train departed, leaving the city of An behind. During the journey, Yi He sized up the other passengers to gauge their power levels, concluding that only about 5 of them could face him in an initial confrontation. Unexpectedly, the college train became the target of unknown attacks. In the face of the attacks, the freshmen grew confused and worried, uncertain whether it was a test or a real threat. Yi He, who had been trying to rest and regenerate, decided to investigate. At that moment, the freshman Zhou Jingxian appeared, gravely injured, warning that the first cars had already been attacked. However, another student with a lion's mane of hair, named Yan Zhengxion, demanded more proof of the attack. Several other freshmen agreed with him and decided to follow him toward the front of the train. The injured student, who recognized Yi He, mentioned that Liu Qingju had asked him not to advance no matter the cost. Yi He was surprised by this information. The young man continued, explaining that she had protected him, and because of that, he would do anything to honor what he believed was her last wish before she died. Angered by the assumption, Yi He punched the young man and scolded him, telling him to stop talking nonsense. Determined, Yi He started to advance toward the front cars, but Zhou Jingxian tried to stop him. In response, Chuzhou threw his sword at the freshman, who managed to block the attack. However, he wasn't strong enough to defend against a knee strike from Yi He that followed immediately after. With the path clear, the pair continued through the cars until they found a dimensional portal. To ensure their safety, Yi He first threw a briefcase through the rift. He found it strange that he couldn't detect any life forms through the portal, but he crossed through it anyway. Upon entering, he noticed that Chuzhou was no longer by his side. He then spotted a trail of light and decided to follow it, arriving at a completely destroyed city with no signs of life. To investigate, he leaped to the top of a building and unleashed his power, trying to find out who was behind it all. The burst of power was noticed by a few hidden students. Among them, the wounded Liu Qingju recognized that Yi He had come through the portal. With his maneuver, he had managed to attract the attention he wanted, and soon a man wearing a pig mask approached from behind. Realizing it was a mask, Yi He lunged at the man and tried to blow up his face, but the enemy withstood the attack without moving. Instead, he pierced Yi He's abdomen with a machete. To the attacker's surprise, his target's regenerative ability was absurd. Taking advantage of the hesitation, Yi He forced the mask open and vomited nuclear energy directly into it, an attack the disguised man could not withstand. After his victory, he found a pendant inside the pig mask, confirming that this was all a test from Huadu. Immediately, the machete in his body dissolved. Suddenly, an arrow whizzed toward him, but Yi He shattered it with just a look. Immediately after, a new enemy revealed himself, firing several magic arrows that struck him head-on. However, the arrows were not enough to stop him, as he activated a monstrous armor. The release of power was so intense that it caused the building he was on to collapse. From a distance, the freshman watched the cloud of dust. Amidst the rubble, Yi He tried to locate his attacker and spotted a man who, this time, was wearing a rabbit mask, leading him to assume it was a Zodiac-themed attack. Despite its red eyes and cute appearance, the new adversary was anything but docile and charged forward, displaying to Yi He's surprise an advanced knowledge of Kung Fu. Just as the enemy was about to strike his face with a spear, a wall of ice suddenly rose up in front of him, blocking the blow. The rabbit found itself surrounded when Chuzhou appeared, ready to defeat it. The animal, however, dodged quickly and launched a spear strike against the swordsman. In no mood for games, Chu summoned his powerful creature, which left the rabbit paralyzed with fear. Moments before, the students were hopeless, even knowing that several high-level freshmen were hunting the masked enemies. The situation changed when the explosion that marked Yi He's arrival occurred. One of the students, nicknamed Lion's Mane, wondered who could have unleashed such power. But for the freshman Ouyang Ze, it was clear that the explosion hadn't been the enemy's doing. Still in the past, the freshmen counted the pendants they had already collected, considering that other seniors might have also gotten some. Faced with the difficulty of obtaining the item from the dragon-masked boss, Ouyang suggested to Yan Zhengxian that they steal the pendants from the other students. Back in the present, Yi He explained to Chuzhou about the Zodiac pendants. The swordsman deduced they would need to hunt other masked figures to collect them. Yi He confirmed and added that since one of the enemies had hit him with an arrow, he could track it more easily. Following the plan, the duo found a trail from a recent fight. Suddenly, Yi He sensed a presence very close by. In a swift reaction, Chuzhou conjured ice spikes, which ended up revealing a girl who was hidden in stealth mode. Without hesitation, Chuzhou attacked the newly revealed girl. However, before the freshman, named Lan Yusi, could be hit, another boy protected her with a barrier of flames. His name was Xin Chen, and he liked to combine fire and smoke in his attacks. Yi He questioned why they had set up an ambush, but the pair replied that they were just hunting other masked individuals. Yi He, however, wasn't convinced by their explanation. In a swift move, he grabbed another girl who was camouflaged nearby, demanding an explanation. Lan Yusi was in disbelief to see that her strategy of using multiple bodies had been discovered. Faced with this, Shin decided to demonstrate his own stealth ability. He absurdly puffed up one of his cheeks and expelled a dense cloud of smoke, forcing Yi He to leap back. Taking advantage of the distraction, Lan attacked with her fan while Shin intensified the flames against the two, and they both boasted about their teamwork. However, Yi He was not intimidated. Clapping his hands together, he completely dispelled the smoke, much to the surprise of the flame-wielding boy. Then, Chuzhou moved forward and landed a right cross on Shin, showing him what a real impact felt like. The fan-wielding girl was paralyzed with fear, and soon felt her legs being frozen by Chuzhou's power. The aura emanating from Yi He was so terrifying that Lan, in an act of desperation, managed to break the ice with her own strength and leaped away to escape. Her attempt, however, was in vain, as Yi He caught up to her and threw her to the ground. Upon hitting the ground, the girl prepared a surprise attack, creating multiple copies of herself. Seeing this, Yi He considered the situation a good opportunity to unleash his demons, and as a result, all of the freshmen's bodies were instantly paralyzed. Defeated, the girl surrendered and handed over her pendants. She explained the rules of the game, stating that the lion-haired man and his partner had likely collected nearly all the items. Then, she revealed that her mission was to lead Yi Hu to this cheating duo. Yi He, in turn, praised Lan Yusi's courage. Meanwhile, the cheating duo continued their hunt, until Yan was surprised to find a dismembered body in the middle of the street. They soon recognized the victim as Shin Chen. It turned out that sometime earlier, the young man who controlled fire had been trying to escape from Yi He. Looking back, he came face to face with a sinister enemy walking toward him. The freshman was petrified when he identified the man with bizarre eyes as the dragon. Without hesitation, the monster attacked him with a blade and collected his pendants. Back in the present, Ouyang and Yan had no doubt that the dragon had eliminated the young man. Ouyang found the situation strange, as the enemy was supposed to be locked in the underground parking garage, but apparently, he had defeated everyone there. The duo was outraged to realize that the challenge had turned into a massacre. With everyone else defeated, the powerful adversary was now also free to hunt for pendants. Determined to gather the artifacts before the monster, Ouyang decided the situation was serious enough to unleash his bloodline awakening, transforming into a winged creature to create an energy source that would attract all pendant holders. Elsewhere, Liu Qingzhu felt desolate, thinking that she just wanted to get into the best college to make her family proud. She also wondered about Yi He's situation, although she had full confidence that he would be able to defeat the dragon. Suddenly, the girl heard a noise and became distressed, as she was in no condition to fight or flee. At that moment, she decided she would give Yi He the pendant she had collected from the ox monster. In the sky, Ouyang tracked the girl as he flew over the city. Noticing she was on the move, he decided to hunt her down like an eagle spotting a fox. Ouyang crashed down, blasting through the building's concrete until he reached the ground floor. However, he heard a voice that didn't belong to Liu Qingzhu. Before him, a dragon stared at him grimly. Ouyang realized the monster had followed him because of the 4 pendants he was carrying. The creature widened its sinister eyes, and the boy recognized the dragon's sealing technique, understanding that the only way out was to defeat it. However, he only had time to defend himself when the monster lunged fiercely with its blade. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Yan, the lion-maned warrior, was facing the heroes. Chuzhou decided to fight alone to test his own strength. Yan charged with feline fury, while Chuzhou prepared an ice counterattack. The two were locked in a balanced fight, activating their lineage monsters, while Yi He watched the battle from a distance, somewhat bored. The fight continued until Yan received a distress signal from Ouyang, and, distracted, was nearly wounded by Chuzhou's blade. He then decided to break off the confrontation to save his friend. Yi He, however, did not accept Yan's withdrawal, and landed a blow that sent the big man flying about 5 meters. Furious at the surprise attack, Yan went all out against Yi He, but a few minutes later he was already sprawled on the ground, completely knocked out. Yi He took a liking to Yan's sword and decided he would borrow it, making a few adjustments to the blade to suit his own style. Searching Yan's spatial ring, Chuzhou found no pendants from the masked ones, but he did find something interesting. It was another type of pendant, which emitted an oscillating signal. Ouyang was utterly spent, convinced he had given his all to strike the dragon with his sealing nail. Yet, even at the cost of his own arm, he had come just short of reaching the enemy's heart. Facing the monster's maw, he accepted his defeat to Shenlong, and felt the creature's blade plunge into his chest. Meanwhile, Liu continued her desperate struggle to reach the terrace, knowing she would be Shenlong's next prey. Her only hope was that Yi He would arrive in time to rescue her. She tried to release the energy of her ghost bird bloodline, but collapsed to the ground, too weak to continue. It was then she saw the dragon closing in, and her only thought was to send another signal, this time to protect Yi He. However, the monster's murderous eyes flashed again, triggering an explosion on the terrace. Liu could only watch as the beast's blade surged toward her. At that moment, Yi He appeared, fulfilling a promise made to Lady Qin Lan, and struck the monster with a force that made the building tremble. Yi He told Liu to flee to the east, where she would find support. The dragon then turned to the newcomer, who noticed the nail still embedded in the creature's chest. The battle between them began, and Yi He was pleased to face an opponent of such caliber. The dragon went berserk, and from Yi He's expression, it was clear he was caught off guard. In response, he unleashed his atomic power and equipped himself with the Demora armor. The blast shattered part of the dragon's mask, but Yi He noticed that the enemy's attack power had increased. Suddenly, the creature snapped Yi He's borrowed sword and then struck him from behind. However, he managed to catch the blade with his teeth, clenched his fist, and delivered a powerful uppercut that the double-eyed being felt with full force. Yi He seized the opportunity to strike all of the creature's vital points, as it was already weakened by Ouyang's nail. The dragon dropped its sword, ready to fall. It was then that Yi He delivered his finishing blow, which transformed into an immense tornado. The immense tornado had been produced by Lan Yuxi's fan, which Yi He had also borrowed, but he didn't stop there, as his intention was to strike the creature's face to ensure a humiliating end. With all his might, he unleashed a barrage of powerful blows against the weakened opponent, who ended up practically embedded in the wall. Even so, the dragon declared its will to kill. Faced with this, Yi He finished off the creature and took the dragon pendant for himself. While Yan was still processing the loss of his friend, Yi He and the others respected his moment of mourning. The protagonist then took the ox pendant that Liu had acquired and arranged all the artifacts in zodiacal order. He was puzzled, as nothing happened. It was then that Yan explained that the dragon pendant wasn't necessary, as its sole function was to destroy the bearers of the other pendants. With this information, Yi He removed the pendant, and the magic finally manifested. A large smoky portal opened in the sky, revealing an immense yellow eye that sucked him in before he had any chance to defend himself. Suddenly, all the students awoke on the Wadu train, in disbelief that they were still alive. A voice announced that it had all been just a test. The voice announced that first place went to the trio who had managed to gather the 12 zodiac pendants. However, the grand prize, to be awarded upon enrollment, was given to Yi He for his exceptional performance, causing a murmur among the other students. As a reward, Yi He won a new draw for a model monster and acquired a level 13 summoned vampire. While Yi He was pleased with his new acquisition, he was approached by Ouyang, who was accompanied by Yan. Ouyang asked if he had won the fight against the dragon, and Yi He confirmed that he had not only won, but also killed the enemy. Ouyang then revealed that he intended to create a new club at the university and wanted to appoint Yi He as president. He explained that he hoped, for the first time, to break the tradition of the top freshmen and the club president always being students from Huadu, which made the other students on the train very excited and confident. Despite the general excitement, Yi He stood his ground, stating that he preferred to go his own way. Even with the refusal, Ouyang handed him a card, sealing the beginning of a possible future partnership. When the train finally arrived in Huadu, Yi He was impressed by the size of the city. An assistant guided the students through an exclusive passageway, where they came across the ship that would transport them to the college, leaving everyone speechless. On board, Yi He approached Liu and poked her, but the girl reminded him that her mother didn't want her to get too friendly with him, even though they were technically engaged. She then warned him to control himself, or else he might lose a finger. Yi He, however, just wanted to know why they needed a ship, and Liu explained that the college was in the sky. And so, they took off towards the city in the clouds. During the journey, the ship passed through an electromagnetic net, and Yi He realized its function was to keep demonic beasts away. Upon disembarking, the students were taken to their dormitories in a kind of elevator. Yi He liked the size of his new room and enthusiastically explored each luxurious room. Soon after, he used his phone to buy some upgrade items for his vampire, and a drone quickly delivered his order. After ingesting the cores, he began to feel the changes in his body. He noticed that his fangs had grown, and upon seeing his claws were also larger, he decided to run a test, striking his own body. Concluding that his regeneration was even faster, the boy entered the training room and raised the cosmo of his heart. Then, he projected the vampiric form in front of him and ordered it to attack him with full force. The creature, which manifested in a dual form with roses, threw the first punch. Yi He crossed his arms to block, but the blow was so powerful that it broke the bones in his hands and sent him flying several meters back. Unsatisfied, he decided to use his time-stopping power. During the ability's 5-second duration, he felt the weight of gravity on his body become so intense that it even burst the pores on his face. Still, the boy wanted more. The next day, Yi He noticed the sun was bothering his eyes a little while Chuzhou showed him the curriculum, which required choosing a mentor. However, a message in the school's group chat announced that, due to his success in the pendant test, Yi He could choose any mentor he wanted. They arrived at the gym, but since the line for the mentors was huge and the idea seemed boring to him, Yi He decided to take a walk around the city. As he walked, he caught a scent of blood that put him on alert, as he realized it was no ordinary blood. Upon investigating, he saw that the source of the scent was a girl savoring a large sandwich. Yihe was surprised. Despite the girl's cute appearance, she possessed a frightening aura. Suddenly, she stared at him and asked if he had been training the demonic flesh technique. Intrigued by her mature way of speaking, Yihe listened as the girl explained that she had helped Little Hu perfect the same technique. He was stunned to realize she was referring to the spirit of the statue, whom she claimed to have taken as a disciple some 90 years ago. Since Yihe didn't seem to believe her story, the girl became indignant at his disbelief. To him, the idea of her being an elder was as unlikely as him becoming the emperor. In response to his skepticism, she decided to demonstrate the nature of her power, making him see a vision of his own head rolling from a guillotine. The illusion left him petrified with fear. To calm him down, the girl offered him a lollipop and asked him not to report her to the college, explaining that she only had 2 hours a day to enjoy the physical world. Yihe then wanted to know who she was. In a gentler tone, she introduced herself as Gong Kei, an extremely powerful master who, according to her, had made the college president cry when they were children. Recognizing her overwhelming power, Yihe knelt before her. He told her he had wandered for years in search of his true master and humbly offered to be her disciple, which made her blush a little. Meanwhile, in the gymnasium, the 5 college directors were being watched with admiration by the freshmen, who hoped to have them as mentors. In truth, the higher-ups were there to meet Yihe, the only student to score full marks in every category of the pendant test. They didn't know that the test's dragon boss was an artificial intelligence based on a national-level warrior named Fu Hongsheng, whose record had been unbroken for 100 years. The director's expectation was for Yihe to become a grandmaster. Their hope was shattered when one of the agents reported that Yihe had asked to become the disciple of Gong Kei, the former professor of the Imperial University and current special agent. The news left the directors terrified. At the same time, Yihe insisted on following the girl, but she explained that she had been expelled from the college. He then promised that if she accepted him as her vassal, he would set her free in 2 years. The master liked the offer. Furious, the directors went to confront Gong Kei. One of them, a large man with a stern expression, reminded her that she was forbidden from having contact with the students and ordered her to go home. Just to provoke them, Gong Kei gave an order to her new disciple, telling him to accompany her. As they walked, Gong Kei explained that she had unintentionally hurt many students in the past, which was why she was confined to the research institute until she could learn to control her strength. She then asked if Yihe was afraid to be her disciple. Far from being afraid, the young man was thrilled by the prospect of being torn to pieces. They arrived at floor 66, which had a very narrow hallway made especially for her. Noticing the timer was about to run out, Gong Kei broke into a run and ordered the young man to follow her as fast as he could. At the last second, she managed to cross the security line before the door slammed shut, thus avoiding being pursued by the faculty. The action activated a protection protocol in the area, which Yihe figured would hinder his powers. Gong Kei then clarified that this place was her cell and showed him the 3-story house, equipped with the best of everything. Meanwhile, President Shi Jingwen was calming the directors, defending Yihe's decision. He argued that their mission was to train someone capable of protecting humanity, and for that reason, they should allow the young man to train with her. On his monitor, the president was tracking the odds of Yihe surviving his time with Gong Kei, but he considered that the boy should be prepared to die, and that staying with her would be excellent training. His wish was for the new generation of warriors to be ready for the new world as soon as possible. Back in the cell, Yihe began to train with his new master, who wanted to assess his power level. She started with a stretch, and as soon as Yihe took his combat stance, she attacked his vital points directly to demonstrate the intensity of her methods. In response, Yihe activated his monstrous lineage. However, Gong Kei simply dodged the attack and completely enveloped his armor, causing him excruciating pain. After his master's strike, Yihe returned to his normal form, which made Gong Kei feel alive again as she got to taste a little blood. In response, Yihe decided to go all out, revealing a new type of monster. The display of power made Gong Kei even prouder of her disciple, and she decided to take the fight seriously. Gong Kei attacked the humanoid monster, which Yihe promptly enhanced into an armored form. Unfazed, she tore through the armor as if it were paper, much to her disciple's astonishment. When his master leaped onto the giant, Yihe activated the armor's spikes for protection, but she surprised him by creating an illusion to chain him. Inside the illusion, he found himself once again about to be executed by a guillotine. The blade fell swiftly, but before his head could be severed, he shouted the words, "Zawarudo." At his shout, his vampiric form manifested, and Yihe understood that only with sheer willpower could he escape that illusory world. He then summoned several meteors that gradually shattered the parallel reality. When it was over, Yihe found himself lying on the ground, his armor gone, under his master's gaze. Still somewhat dazed, Yihe asked if Gong Kei had cheated. His master stated she had won the battle fairly, admitting only that she might have used a little too much force. However, Yihe could tell she wasn't being entirely honest. At this, she apologized and, crying, promised she would go easier on him next time. Yi reassured the girl, telling her he was honored to serve her. Sensing her disciple's level, Gongke asked what he would like to learn. Yi expressed his desire to become a martial artist and to understand how the master had managed to cut through his transformed arm. Gongke explained that it required a lot of repetition and training to find the line of execution, a line that ran through the body of any being, whether human or beast. This led Yi to conclude that the master's cut, unlike the dragon's attack, was not based on strength, but on the ability to follow this thread, much like a butcher. However, Gongke suggested that her disciple learn one thing at a time to truly master his techniques. She explained that a martial artist, unlike an apprentice, possessed the knowledge of internal visualization, which allowed them to see an opponent's internal weak points. Therefore, the first step was to develop a mind stronger than the body. Yi liked his master's teaching style, as upon acquiring the vampiric model, he had already increased his mental strength with the power of Zawarudo. Next, Gongke told him there were 4 categories of martial arts techniques, divided into Heaven, Earth, Mystic Yellow, and No Level. She detailed that the lesser universities taught the No Level techniques, while at Huadu Academy, they practiced those of the Mystic Yellow level. Curious, Yi asked about the Heaven and Earth techniques. Gongke told him they were relics from secret realms and ancient ruins, and that only 10 of them existed in the world. Although the Imperial University possessed one, he still lacked the strength or permission to approach it. However, she revealed that he could learn a secret Earth technique known as the Killer Bodhi Heart Sutra, the same one that inspired Huzinho to create Evil Incarnate. The prospect left Yi extremely excited. Gongke then took him to another reality, one of pure killing intent, as she admitted she loved to see blood splatter. That night, after class, Chuzhou was walking through the city when he spotted Yi and approached to talk to his friend. Unexpectedly, he felt a blade pressed against his neck and immediately prepared for combat. It was then that he noticed Yi. He was enveloped in a sinister aura that made him almost unrecognizable. A few hours earlier, in the illusory realm, Yi was being attacked by zombies, but could only use a blade to defend himself. The goal was for him to instinctively learn the line of execution. At one point, he was overwhelmed and fell amidst the undead. His master, Gong, was impressed with her student, having never seen anyone with such mental fortitude, and she supposed the boy could truly be humanity's hope. After the arduous day, Yi was taking a shower when he received a call from Liu Qingzhu. She informed him that the packages sent by his mother were already in her room. When Yi said he would pop over to get them, Liu blushed and replied that she thought it would be better to send the packages by drone. The two talked about their mentors, but Yi preferred not to speak about his master and pretended there was interference on the line to end the conversation. Midway through the school year, Ouyang had managed to gather a good number of students into the Dragon's Blood Society. However, the group was not well received by the Huadu students, especially by the freshman Xiang Jianhui, who was the most famous in the country. Meanwhile, Yi had disappeared from the spotlight for 3 months, remaining steadfast in his training in the Research Institute's basement. There, he was literally stomped on by his master, a method that helped inject the necessary energy to stabilize his martial artist level. Even with the full weight of that energetic impression, Yi endured and dedicated himself intensely to calisthenics. At a certain point, there was an explosion, and he noticed that his muscles had been renewed, leaving his master enthusiastic about his enhanced physique. After 3 months of training, Yi decided it was time to leave. Gongke cried, already missing her student, who promised to return soon to continue his training. Back in the city, Yi walked, feeling the impact of his confinement, but he had a goal in mind. At Huadu, extracurricular missions to maintain security were worth a lot. So, he went to the activity center to pick up a mission and see his friend Chuzhou, who was happy to see him. Chuzhou revealed he had become a martial artist and was curious about how much Yi had improved since they last saw each other. He wondered if Yi could now defeat Xiang Jianhui, who had beaten Ouyang Ze in just 10 minutes. A short time later, Qingzhu joined her friends. Remembering her mother's teachings, she moved in to give Yi a kiss, but he felt a little hurt that she hadn't greeted him first. Realizing he had misunderstood the gesture, Qingzhu turned away, slightly frustrated. The trio headed to the large screen where the most popular missions were displayed. While Yi analyzed the possibilities, Qingzhu suggested 3 options that would suit the group's skills. She explained that the tasks were classified into 5 levels, but freshmen could only accept missions up to level 2. However, Yi had a privilege card granted by his master, which authorized him to take on more daring missions. Qingzhu wanted to know where he had gotten that card, but Yi didn't answer. After reviewing the options, they decided to accept the most difficult one, which offered the greatest reward. The receptionist at the mission center, however, was outraged by the audacity of the freshman trio. Yi presented his privilege card, but the woman still insisted on consulting the dean's office. After a brief call, her attitude changed and she wished the aspirants good luck. Before leaving, Yi went to the mechatronics building to retrieve the weapon he had received as a bonus from the director. He received a divine star gold sword, capable of conducting 95% of one's martial energy. Upon testing it, Yi noticed the blade was incredibly sharp. The group headed to Lingshui County, traveling as normal students to maintain the mission's secrecy. Upon arriving, Yihe began to discreetly observe the area so as not to alert their targets. Chuzhou suggested they go to the inn provided by the Imperial University, but just then a man appeared, offering a ride in his three-wheeled cargo cart. For some reason, Yihe deduced that the mission had just begun. The group boarded the older man's tricycle, and during the ride, they chatted about the city as if they were good old friends. As they neared the university, the driver invited Yihe to the city festival, which would take place in 2 days. Their final destination was an abandoned house in need of many repairs. As soon as they went inside, Qingzhu entered one of the rooms and found a sinister altar. Yihe judged that the altar had been placed there recently, as it was made of wood, and considering the state of the house, should have already deteriorated. Upon this discovery, Chuzhou promptly drew his sword, determined to shatter the statue at once. Lu Qingzhu, however, suggested they investigate first, as the altar might hold important clues. The girl then pulled away the cloth covering the statue's face, and one of the monument's eyes glowed mysteriously, which also intrigued Yihe about the object's demonic nature. Without hesitation, Chuzhou struck the statue, which began to leak a black liquid. To prevent the entity from escaping, Yihe activated his ability, while Chuzhou used his sword to seal the multi-headed demon that was emerging. Qingzhu was impressed by the scene, until she felt a hand on her shoulder. It was just Yihe, who, noticing the girl was being affected by a psychic power, injected a bit of his own willpower into her to protect her. He deduced that the city's anomalies were related to the statue, and instructed his friends to watch over the sealed monster, as he would go after the old tricycle driver, whom he considered suspicious. Meanwhile, at a local Buddhist temple, the old, toothless tricycle driver was received by one of the priests. He was then guided to a large gate to speak with the head monk about the county's recent strange occurrences. However, as the monk's voice echoed through the corridor, the priest guiding the old man sensed someone's presence and transformed into a lizard-like creature. The elderly man, named Genshing, promptly knelt and declared that there was a living immortal among them. At that moment, Yihe suddenly appeared, protected by the spirit of Zawarudo, and destroyed the creature with a single attack. Next, the Buddhist statues in the temple began to move for combat, but Zaza blocked the first attack, sparing Yihe the need to defend himself. Yihe then pulled the divine sword he had won in college from his spatial ring and began to cut down the statues unceremoniously. The monuments retaliated by firing lasers, but they weren't fast enough to hit him. With a sideways slash, Yihe split one of the figures open, revealing a robotic system inside. During the confrontation, the old rider, who was praying to Buddha, had his life taken. Yihe then understood why he hadn't sensed any life presence from the statues and became intrigued by the local technology. Shortly after, Zaza punched a large gate to signal their arrival, revealing a giant underground temple to Yihe. From there, a monk appeared, offering a message of peace and love. However, Yihe realized the monk was another robot and split the machine in half. Right after, a new monk appeared behind him, remarking that the young man had a heavy energy. Immediately, the floor beneath his feet cracked, and Yihe fell to a lower level filled with doors, where sinister eyes lurked in silence. This time, the creatures were lizardmen with the auras of first and second level martial artists. Undaunted by their numbers, Yihe unleashed the Xuan Huang technique with his divine blade, cutting down a great number of them. He wondered what kind of temple would create so many bizarre creatures. By the end, the hero had piled up so many lizardmen that there were enough to make a leather coat. Still, a bald monk insisted that Yihe's energy needed a spiritual cleansing. Then, the giant Buddha statue rose, filled with hatred, and brought its hand down on Yihe with enough force to strike even his first ancestor. The statue's system, however, malfunctioned, as Yihe had disrupted it. The machine wondered where its robotic eyes were, but all it saw was the form of the summoned Daimora before it. The Daimora unleashed a powerful, thorny punch while chanting a mantra, demonstrating knowledge of Buddhist rituals, and struck the religious android. The android fought back, firing laser beams in all directions before unleashing its arsenal of powerful missiles. However, thermal weapons were ineffective against a martial artist, especially Daimora. The robot tried to attack with spikes once more, but Daimora countered with her nuclear energy jet, securing the victory. After the battle, Yihe walked to the lotus flower-shaped structure and entered through an opening to find out who was behind it all. Half an hour earlier, a pair of scientists had been monitoring Yihe's invasion of the temple. With every machine the protagonist destroyed, they believed the next one would be able to stop him. However, not even the Mecha Buddha was a match for Yihe, leaving the doctors with expressions of despair. The older scientist, who had a peculiar eye, still hoped the guards could buy him some time. It was then that Dr. Feng, a former researcher on the Prometheus project and a current employee of Laserbird, ordered the base to be blown up as soon as they could escape. The Laserbird company had taken over the city's temple, replacing the monks with robots to control the population. They convinced citizens to participate in their experiments under the pretext of receiving a divine blessing. However, before the scientists could flee, Yi arrived. A few security guards tried to stop him but were easily defeated. Finding himself cornered, Dr. Feng threatened to blow everything up with the push of a button. Suddenly, Yi grabbed the doctor and nearly crushed his head, but then let him go. He then demanded to know what they were doing in Linshui County. Yi questioned the scientist about the 3 murdered martial artists. In response, the old man explained that if he spoke, a system would blow up his head. Immediately after, he activated a poison capsule in his mouth and died, which surprised Yi, who realized that the Laserbird agents had become suicidal. With the scientist's cardiac arrest, the base activated its self-destruct system. However, Yi possessed a special ability and warned the scientist's corpse that dying wouldn't be so simple. With a strike to the old man's jugular, he turned him into a ghoul who would serve him eternally. After regenerating, the scientist's body took on the appearance of a 40-year-old man, and Yi decided to call him Mad Doctor. Using the mental link he had established with the man, Yi began to investigate how long the city had been under Laserbird's power. He accessed a memory in which a young scientist was devouring the flesh of 3 youths who had been sent to the temple as an offering to Buddha. In that same memory, the doctor began to suspect something was wrong when he noticed the citizens falling asleep while seeking blessings. It was while praying to the so-called celestial descent realm that he noticed a numerical sequence on his arm, recognizing it as an internal company code. Upon typing the numbers into a computer, he realized he was being used as a test subject and that the sequence had been created by him as a way to help him recover his memory. It became clear that the entity behind the whole mystery was the celestial descent realm, which led Yi to understand that it was all part of a macabre cult. Through the doctor's mind, Yi discovered that the city had been chosen for the company's experiments but was eventually taken over by the cult, which had brainwashed all its inhabitants. An immense number of cyborgs had been created to replace the martial artists. The doctor revealed that he had tried to regain his consciousness several times, but always in vain. The cult operated in 4 stages that gradually eroded people's will, turning them into zombies. The life force of these individuals was used to feed a demonic fetus, taken from a secret realm that was about to mature. With this information, Yi deduced that the event would take place on the day of the city's festival. After extracting all the necessary memories to piece together the puzzle, Yi understood that the doctor was likely involved in the Golden Gene project. Even so, he decided to first resolve the anomaly in Linshui County. Although his mission was already registered as complete, Yi wanted to steal the victory from the Heavenly Descent Kingdom. To do so, he ordered the doctor to find a way to release his blood into the city's water supply system. His reasoning was that since the people were already in stage 4 of the contamination and beyond saving, it would be better for them to serve him than the demonic fetus. The protagonist returned to the base and found his friends having a meal. Liu, however, didn't much care for the local cuisine. Upon closer inspection, Chujo realized they were eating human flesh and understood that something was terribly wrong. Yi told his companions everything, and Liu deduced that the mission's difficulty level had evolved to over 3. Despite this, Yi was confident they could handle the situation and planned to wait, as the shadow usually revealed itself at night. At the Laserbird headquarters, the leaders were discussing how to proceed after the protocol's activation in Linshui County. One of them ordered the researchers to be blown up, and then for an investigation team to be sent to the location. At the county's water treatment plant, the doctor removed the bomb implanted in his body, and Yi instructed him to proceed with the plan. Meanwhile, a man known as Catfish was arriving at the train station. He was accompanied by Ares, a woman with the appearance of a working mother, who was curious to know which of Laserbird's enemies had tried to interfere with their plans. Other members, such as Bluebird and Golden Snake, suggested they inspect the base. However, Black Lion, the captain following close behind, thought it better to destroy everything they could. He split the group up so they could finish the mission as quickly as possible. Golden Snake and Bluebird were assigned to the city and soon noticed the eerie atmosphere. At one point, the woman spotted the clay statue and noticed something unusual about it. At the same time, Golden Snake was receiving an overview from the captain about all the damage Yi had caused. It was then that he realized the inhabitants, in a zombie-like sleepwalking state, were beginning to surround them. Serpent called Bluebird to battle, but she, revealing herself to be possessed like the other inhabitants, plunged a knife into his stomach. It was at that moment that he also noticed the strange statue of the moon demon. From high above, Yi gazed down at the city and sensed his vital field being blocked. So he decided to warn his friends about the direction the horde of sleepwalkers was gathering. Suddenly, Serpent and Bluebird found themselves tied to logs, watched by the sleepwalkers. He tried in vain to wake his friend, and in desperation, attempted to negotiate with the zombies, who were drooling at the prospect of fresh meat. At that instant, a bell began to toll, and the moon seemed to descend upon the county, making the servants even more frenzied. They then formed a pile of bodies to reach the silvery glow, scaling the log where the two members of Laserbird were bound. Captain Black Lion remarked that something was happening in the city. As they left the base, they saw an enormous moon that seemed to be swallowing nearly everything, with a beam of light touching the ground. The sight left the captain deeply concerned, and the three of them decided to run toward the source of the trouble. On the way, they spotted something unusual, and the captain hurled his sword. The weapon, however, was blocked by a kind of wheel. He found it strange to encounter a magical item in the middle of nowhere, but soon the figure of Liu Qingju revealed herself, using her umbrella-shaped shield to welcome them. The encounter made the captain wonder who their true opponents really were. Catfish and Ares advanced on Liu and Chu, who held their ground. The battle began when the hero summoned an ice wall, but the barrier was shattered as if it were made of sand. With their defense broken, the pair decided to retreat, only to be suddenly intercepted from behind by the lion. Simultaneously, a sword descended from the sky and nearly split the captain in two. It was Yi He, marking his arrival to the fight. Next, the lion used his 12 Phantoms technique, multiplying into 12 copies that attacked the protagonist from all sides. He promptly summoned Zaza and began to leap unpredictably between the Phantoms until he reached the real Black Lion, whom he took down with ease. Meanwhile, Yi He drained the captain's blood, raising his martial artist level to 8 and leaving the other two bandits in disbelief at his strength. Using a demonic technique, he raised the captain's corpse. Seeing the situation, the woman threw her baby into the air, which transformed into an aberration. The distraction facilitated the escape of Catfish and the mother, who abandoned her child. Yi He ordered his friends to take care of the cyborg and set off in pursuit of the fleeing martial masters. Chuzhou, in turn, activated the ice dragon form and leaped toward the monster to confront it. Swinging his sharp sword, he realized the creature was incredibly fast, so he ordered the captain's demonic shadow to show its worth. The entity used its multiplication technique, slicing the cyborg into several pieces. Liu also focused his energy and awakened the bird bloodline, which enveloped the enemy in a globe of energy. Meanwhile, Bagre was fleeing through the sewer, but Yi He caught up to him, giving him no chance to escape. Ares, his mother, running desperately, saw what was happening to her son and felt a chill as she realized she was completely alone. She then decided to head toward the moonlight, reasoning that it was better to risk everything than be slaughtered by Yi He. However, she stopped abruptly when she came across a horde of sleepwalkers piling on top of each other. Yi He was right behind her, confident she would capture her as well. Without a second thought, the woman ran toward the zombies and used them as a ladder to reach a large gate. Upon arriving, she was moved to see her parents again, making her wonder if she too had been abandoned. As the woman approached the gate, the image of Yi He pursuing her began to dissipate. The protagonist then understood that the Heavenly Descent Kingdom had used the woman's fear to create an illusion of him, luring her inside. Yi He simply watched the events unfold, awaiting the arrival of the demons for the confrontation. Then, the moon returned to its normal size, which dispersed the zombies wandering through the ghost town. Liu was apprehensive about the mission, but the protagonist told her to relax, as someone very powerful was secretly helping them. Chuzhou was intrigued by this information, since, in his experience, only heirs of great martial families undergoing trials among mortals received such superior aid. Yi He released the shadow demons and asked his friends to destroy the statues scattered throughout the city along with them. Chuzhou left without objection, but Qingju seemed hesitant. The protagonist asked his future bride to trust his intuition. The girl agreed, but reminded him that he should also trust his friends. After that, the protagonist went to meet the scientist, who had gathered the defeated cyborgs inside a crater. Yi He released his great monster and flooded the hole with his own blood, covering the creatures, which would soon become a great troop under his command. The scientist confirmed that the modified mosquitoes were already on their way to the county to infect the population with Yi He's vampiric blood. Pleased with the news, the protagonist ordered the scientist to repair the Mecha Buddha so they could use its weapons in the battle. He was eager to meet the leader of the celestial cult. With that, he and his group left by bus for the county, expecting to see the fetus drop like the New Year's ball in Times Square. On the day of the festival, the moon seemed to gaze down with satisfaction at the commotion below. The high priest surveyed the scene with pride, for this was only the third occasion the fetus had truly been born, and his name would be etched into the annals of their faith. The previous births had led to drastic consequences. The first had wreaked mass devastation, while the second had turned the site into a hostile S-rank forbidden zone. Determined, the priest prepared the ritual to welcome the demon for a third time. He ascended a pile of corpses to reach the portal, where he offered his own blood as a sacrifice. Then, a divine coffin was brought to him, and he positioned it before the other worshippers. They too added their blood to the ritual. The bald priest then began the invocation. Suddenly, a bell echoed through the cathedral, awakening the souls of the sleepwalkers. However, the priest was outraged to realize that the energy emanating from the ritual was bluish, desecrating the coffin and the sacred ceremony. It was at that moment that Yi He appeared, showing the priest that he too possessed great power and making it clear who the true demon was. Under a blood-stained moon, the priest fell. At that moment, Yi realized his brutality was disapproved of by another figure, a hooded man with a malicious appearance. This man invited him to join the divine sect, then revealing himself as Lin Qi, the true supreme bishop. Without hesitation, Yi charged at the sect leader. However, Lin Qi unleashed tentacles that ensnared his opponent. In response, Yi promptly summoned the guardian Zaza, who delivered an unexpected and violent attack against the bishop. Despite the blow, the bishop displayed an extraordinary power of regeneration. The situation changed when a group of priests surrounded Yi, chanting a mantra, and mysteriously took their own lives. Yi realized it was just another trick, and his suspicion was confirmed when the men's bodies began to transform into monsters. The creatures took on a demonic appearance, so dreadful that it inspired repulsion and the urge to flee immediately. Realizing it was an army of demons, Yi summoned his own forces, composed of lizard cyborgs, and the two fronts clashed. Meanwhile, another priest, who now had hair, used his spiritual sight to locate Yi and discovered that his objective was the fetus. The sudden arrival of Liu and Chuzhou in their armor made the priest fear the mission's failure and think only of escaping. Yi approached the coffin, which emanated an overwhelming cold, and was rewarded for modifying the original ritual. Determined to eliminate the demon, he opened the coffin, but found it empty. In that instant, everything around him fell silent, and the high priest appeared again. He revealed that the giant moon was an illusion, and explained that he was, in fact, inside a dream. As this was happening, Liu and Chuzhou continued to fight bravely against the hairy priest's archdemon. In his draconic form, Chuzhou decided to unleash his most powerful strike against the demon. The creature blocked the attack with its bare hands, shattering the warrior's sword, but a sharp fragment ended up piercing the monster's mouth. At that moment, the Mad Doctor arrived wielding an energy bazooka and released poison drones to help the duo. The priest wondered where such powerful youths had come from, and Chuzhou replied that they were just freshmen from Huadu. Suddenly, several coffins fell in front of the priest, releasing sleepwalkers among whom Liu recognized some warriors from Huadu. The cleric then praised his god for the extra help. Realizing Liu Qingzhu was in danger, the Mad Doctor decided to send his army of giants to support her. She managed to break free from the sleepwalkers' attack in an attempt to help Yi, but the priest ordered his corpses to stop her from getting near the fetus. Despite the order, a projectile hit Liu Qingzhu squarely. Even wounded, she did not give up on her purpose and managed to fall into Yi's arms. Even wounded, Liu Qingzhu took flight, carrying Yi away from danger. Along the way, she noticed the giants had been defeated by the warrior corpses. Suddenly, a voice ordered Liu Qingzhu to put Yi down, subjecting her to a psychic attack. Unable to resist, she lost control and began to freefall, watched by the corpses below, whose necks moved like amoebas and transformed into sharp stakes to intercept her. However, Yi recovered his strength in time to invoke his ability, Za Warudo. He apologized to Liu Qingzhu for having fallen asleep, and his return brought her great relief. The priest was outraged to see that Yi had escaped the illusion, and along with his corpses, advanced on him. In response, Yi summoned his humanoid giant, which trampled the enemies. The fight was interrupted by the sound of a bark. The priest, responsible for trapping Yi in the illusory realm, began to suffer the consequences, experiencing a similar fate. Then the voice of the moon demon ordered the priest to enter one of the coffins so it could use his physical form. While this was happening, Yi eliminated all the remaining enemies, but one was still left. The moon demon itself descended, wearing a cold expression. Yi was pleased to see that the true leader had finally decided to appear. Yi realized that everything around him had transformed into a giant moon. He surmised he was under the effect of a chimerism, an illusion capable of causing real harm, and against which his system-granted golden body was useless. The demon approached and commented that he admired Yi's bravery, stating that the boy possessed the perfect compatibility to complete his transformation. He then invited him to join him to rule the world. However, Yi refused the partnership, saying he liked to work alone. The demon then warned him that first he asked, but then he simply took what he wanted. With that said, the demon tore the giant's body apart with a single hand, leaving Yi immobilized. Upon touching him, the deity couldn't feel the boy's soul. Yi laughed, explaining that he had used the vampiric template's regeneration, which split his body in two. If one half was destroyed, he would simply wake up in the other. The demon was incredulous at the young man's shrewdness, until a golden blade shattered that illusory reality. It was Qing Long, the chief of the first division of the Order of the Bird and Dragon. Yi gave a quiet laugh, as he had reported the demon to the order, knowing he couldn't defeat him alone. The deity decided to spare Yi's body to use it later, and threw him far from the fight. The division chief grew curious about the demon's interest in the boy, but decided he would finish him off first, launching a merciless attack. Yihe traveled in a pod to a forest, feeling a bit nauseous from the journey. Upon arriving, he noticed he was in a place far from Lingshui County. Fortunately, he had already sent his friends and the doctor to a safe location, so he decided to take the opportunity to study the power he had absorbed from the moon demon, Barros. His intention was to merge it with his Rakudo abilities to affect illusory areas, as the Vermilion model possessed the capacity to manipulate time. As a result, his vampiric ability evolved, gaining several new attributes. Yihe was stunned by the immense strength he had acquired, though the process of obtaining it had nearly led his friends to their deaths. After briefly testing his new power, he decided to go to the college to ask his contact for support, as he was certain that Master Qinglong would interrogate him. Back in Huadu, he met President Xin Jingwen, who congratulated him on the mission in the county. Yihe, however, found it strange how a sacrificial cult could fade from the spotlight so easily. The president assured him that the mission would be listed in the official records as level 4, so as not to alarm the public, but that the reward would be equivalent to a level 5. Yihe was intrigued by the man's flattery, as he seemed not to have noticed the shortcuts he had taken to win. The next day, while waiting for the interrogation in the president's office, Yihe saw images of the fight in the county, which had been turned into a huge crater, and he grew worried about the possibility of the demon pursuing him. The president had already warned him that Qinglong was known to seal such demonic influences, but his apprehension remained until Chief Qing finally entered the room, sporting a very different style from the one Yihe knew. Qinglong explained that he had been left with some after effects from the battle, and was there to seal the demonic influence in Yihe. Before beginning, he decided to share a bit of his own story, revealing that he had almost turned into a demonic beast, and, as a result, was exiled to an island to avoid harming innocents. Then, Qinglong removed his bandages, and the symbols on his body made Yihe's eyes bleed. Even so, Qinglong was impressed, as anyone else would have fainted at the sight. The master then announced he would heal the boy's demonic mark forever, and unleashed a purification power that Yihe's system recognized immediately. After the procedure, Yihe thanked the man, who asked him if Gong Ke was his master. The boy remembered she had asked him not to spread that information, but Qinglong showed no ill will toward the woman, mentioning that he hoped for a bright future for her. Unexpectedly, he proposed a friendly spar, stating that a match between friends wouldn't hurt anyone. Yihe accepted the challenge and suggested they fight under the moonlight. They headed to an outdoor arena, where the master commented that he would only defend himself using one hand. He set the terms. If Yihe could make him move, he would win the fight and could ask for anything he wanted, in addition to a promotion to the first division of the Bird and Dragon. Yihe agreed and drew his sword, which piqued the master's curiosity about the demonic aura the boy emanated. Yihe's first attack was charged with killing intent, and Qinglong clenched his fist, acknowledging the strike's power. The attack's power was so great that even Gong Ke in her cocoon could feel it. Meanwhile, in the room of student Xiang Jianhui, who was enjoying the company of a young woman, he also felt the boy's killing intent from a distance and found it rather strange. Despite all the surrounding architecture being destroyed, Master Qinglong held his ground. Yihe was surprised by the man's direct attack, who in turn used the military fist, giving him no chance to defend. Seeing the boy fall, the master noticed he had used all his energy on a forbidden technique in an attempt to win. To prevent him from getting seriously injured, he rushed to catch him. With the utmost nonchalance, Yihe remarked that since the master had moved from his spot, he had lost the fight. Qinglong accepted the terms, and Yihe told him he would collect his reward later. The master then instructed him to train his physical body more to be able to sustain his killing aura. Yihe felt proud, as he hadn't even needed to use his emperor model. Qinglong advised the young man to find a master in that regard, almost offering to train him himself, but Yihe missed the hint, and replied that he would ask the president to recommend a teacher. As a gift, the master gave Yihe a Western medallion containing physical cultivation techniques. The young man was delighted, unaware that Qinglong, despite being a grandmaster, had only managed to learn those techniques with great difficulty, and hoped the boy would eventually ask him for help. Later, as Yihe was examining the medallion in his room, the doorbell rang. When he opened the door, he found the freshman Ouyang, who wanted to talk. Yihe let the boy in, but was surprised when he knelt and begged him to take over the presidency of the Dragon's Blood Society. Outraged by the freshman's defeated spirit, Yihe decided to take him training to restore his self-esteem. The session was so intense that Ouyang could barely speak afterward, but Yihe, being generous, offered him a blood transformation pill to help him recover. Once recovered, the young man explained that the society, in the beginning, had managed to attract attention despite being composed of students from other cities. However, it began to be sabotaged by the student council, which was dominated by local students from Huadu. He said that the one mainly responsible for their downfall was a popular student named Xiang, who had publicly humiliated him. Yi-hee just listened to what he considered the boy's sob story about being defeated by the school bully. Ouyang commented that although he could ask an upperclassman for help, it would be frowned upon by the other students. Therefore, he pleaded with Yi-hee to help him, since he was also a freshman. The protagonist decided to agree, and as Ouyang nearly cried with emotion, Yi-hee asked for more details, stating that he wouldn't get into trouble just to beat up a bully. Ouyang then revealed that there was a reconquest plan in the Xia Kingdom, announced by a professor. The goal was to reclaim 12 cities that had been taken by demonic beasts, and university students would be recruited for this purpose. As president, Yi-hee would be responsible for achieving the necessary score for the Dragon's Blood Society to participate. Yi-hee agreed to the plan. As soon as Ouyang left his room, he saw it as a great opportunity to grow stronger with the rewards that would come from the new mission. Meanwhile, several students were gathered at the Dragon's Blood Society headquarters. Xin Chen was complaining about Ouyang being late for the meeting, which annoyed Yanjuba of Lion with the young man's audacity. However, he restrained himself and replied that Ouyang had gone to get the organization's true president. The response outraged Xin Chen and Lan Yusei, who suggested disbanding the society for good. Yan encouraged the boy to continue, wanting to know what his idea was. Xin Chen then said that the best thing to do was to follow a new master from an imperial family named Zhou Kai. A murmur started among those present, who questioned whether they should trust Yi-hee, who had been missing for a long time. Before Yan could answer, Zhou Kai himself burst into the room, kicking the door open. This time, Yan didn't hold back and lunged at the intruder, but a girl with a cold expression stood in his way. The leader of the new group ordered those who wanted to join him to demonstrate their loyalty by beating up Yan. Faced with the society members' hesitation, Zhou Kai became furious and declared that no one there was worthy of following him. At that exact moment, Yi-hee arrived and grabbed the man by his hair. Without hesitating, he threw both him and the girl with the cold expression out the window. Yi-hee then ordered all the unworthy members to leave the room immediately. Regretting their misguided decision, they hesitated. Seeing this, Ouyang offered them a second chance, as long as they accepted a punishment. Yi-hee shot the students a sinister look, and they promptly agreed. Shortly after, Yi-hee met with the representatives to plan a strategy that would allow them to participate in the Xi Reconquest event in time. He declared that his goal was to defeat Xiang Jianhui and cut the evil off at the root. However, Ouyang informed him that the strongest freshman would be going into seclusion to attempt to advance to the martial master level, which left Yi-hee disappointed. Since the best way to get money was to draw attention, he asked if anyone present knew of the Bird and Dragon Division. Yan's eyes lit up, as it was the most important martial division in the kingdom of Xia. Yi-hee then came up with an idea. As the division's current ace agent, he would challenge every student in the college below the Grandmaster level. Yan was stunned, knowing that no student had such permission. Yi-hee confirmed this was true, though he couldn't go into detail. Trusting him, Ouyang decided to publish the explosive news in the college newspaper. The news spread quickly, leaving everyone shocked by both the challenge and the revelation of who Yi-hee had become. Meanwhile, Chu and Liu laughed at the news, as they knew their friend loved to cause a commotion. With the challenge made official, the society's publicity team began inviting the public to watch the fight live. Ouyang was thrilled with the high number of likes, the anticipation for the broadcast, and the growing interest from advertisers. On the other hand, Zhou Kai planned to use the opportunity to get his revenge on Yi-hee. On the day of the event, the arena was packed, and the fight would be broadcast worldwide. To make a grand entrance, Yi-hee arrived by helicopter with all the flair of a rock star. The veteran Long Tao, eager to challenge Yi-hee and leverage the event's popularity to boost his follower count, made a stylish entrance into the arena, aiming to be remembered as the first fighter. The crowd went wild, but Yi-hee quickly landed a blow to his opponent's chin. Even with a broken nose, all Long Tao could think about was the fame he sought. The next challenger was Yao Ling, a fighter who had already defeated 3 level 7 martial masters. However, Yi-hee shattered her spear using only one hand. Bored with the individual challenges, Yi-hee suggested that all remaining opponents attack him at once. The challengers advanced as a group, but he defeated them easily, one by one. Watching the scene, Zhou Kai was intrigued by the young man's strength and considered calling his older brother for help. When everyone else was on the ground, Yating, Kai's brother, arrived. He possessed enough strength to defeat a grandmaster and began by apologizing for his younger brother's insolence during his visit to the Dragon Blood Society. Yi-hee then asked why he was challenging him. Yating replied that he was fighting for the Zhou family's reputation, arguing that despite Kai's mistake, Yi-hee had no right to dishonor his brother. He then demanded that Yi-hee kneel and apologize in front of everyone. The confrontation became inevitable. The two attacked simultaneously, and amidst the explosions from their blows, it was hard to tell who would emerge victorious. It was then that Yi-hee noticed the temperature of Yating's armor rising, as his opponent's arm was overcome by the energy of the burning sun blood. The crowd watched anxiously as the fight unfolded, until Yi-hee activated his monster armor and landed a punch straight to Yating's face. The display of power prompted a boy in the crowd to call him the Demon King. Meanwhile, Yating was more concerned with understanding how Liu could have fallen in love with such a violent warrior. Suddenly, he sensed Yi He growing in size and had to defend himself against the protagonist's attack in his giant form. Realizing his bones wouldn't hold out for much longer, Yating decided to use his speed to even the odds, since he stood no chance in terms of strength. With this new tactic, he managed to dodge Yi He's attacks and took the opportunity to raise his body temperature, which began to glow as if he were carrying the sun on his back. Then, he unleashed his ultimate scorching fire attack. Yi He was thrilled by an attack that was finally worthwhile and decided to take the opportunity to also test a move he had developed, the sky-rending dragon cannon. The two techniques collided with a devastating impact, and Yating was certain he would die. However, the university's director appeared to save him. Although the director had no intention of intervening in the tournament, Yi He had used the move on purpose to get his attention. The man then decided to help the protagonist organize the event and, in a voice that sounded like a megaphone, asked who else would dare to challenge the champion. Since no one stepped forward, the director declared Yi He the winner of the tournament. The protagonist celebrated while the announcer declared that the freshman would be remembered at the university as a true legend. After his victory, Yi He was once again the main topic on social media and became a role model for the new fighters at Ancheng School. However, this popularity didn't sit well with the Bird and Dragon Division, while the Dragon's Blood Society celebrated the achievement. In his room, Yi He was talking to the Mad Doctor, who informed him that he had found a way to unlock the Golden Gene. The doctor, however, warned that the artifact had a laser bird tracker that would be activated if it were tampered with. For that reason, he had started building a magnetically shielded room, which would be ready in a week. After the explanation, Yi He ended the call. Intrigued, he decided to visit the doctor's mind and discovered that Project Prometheus was deeply connected to the Celestial Descent realm, using its resources to secretly cultivate a demonic fetus. Yi He also learned that, subsequently, those in charge of the project had betrayed the cult to capture the first demon and conduct experiments. This research led to several breakthroughs, such as Project Eden, which planned to create an artificial god to stop the invasions on Blue Star, and Project Spark, focused on genetic mutations in humanity, which gave rise to Laserbird's golden gene. He realized that his discoveries were just the tip of the iceberg, and that he would soon have to deal with Project Prometheus directly. For now, he decided to study the amulet Qing Long had given him. He activated the sleep cultivation method and awoke as a knight on a rainy battlefield. In that place, there was a fire that never went out, and on the fallen men were claw marks that didn't seem human. He then removed his armor, preparing to face the mission's boss. A carriage approached, driven by a mustached man who swerved around Yi He as if he were just a rock in the road. Yi He, however, stopped the vehicle, leading the man to assume he was a thief. He felt offended, but the driver explained that his mistrust was due to a previous incident when a blue-haired man had tried to steal his family's legacy. Losing patience with the long story, Yi He smashed the carriage to ensure the man would guide him through that world of martial aura. Upset, the old driver led Yi He down a trail that was supposed to take him to the test site. However, the tracks on the ground suddenly disappeared, as the man had decided to trick the hero. Unconcerned, Yi He looked for clues in the sky and quickly unraveled the trap in their path, much to the driver's surprise, who hadn't expected the young man to see through the prank so quickly. Yi He realized he needed to reach the plains and asked to borrow the man's horse. So, the two rode swiftly, but the animal suddenly threw them to the ground upon sensing danger. It was then that Yi He spotted a sinister monster and deduced it was the calamity known as the Star Devourer. The creature launched a blast of fire at them, but the old man emerged unscathed, as if he were immune to danger. Yi He understood that the goal of this challenge was not to kill the beast, but to collect sacred symbols to give to it. The driver was startled to see that Yi He had also survived the fire attack without a single injury. Gradually, the young man was managing to access the power of the monsters from that region. To fight the creature on equal footing, he decided to transform into the Emperor model. The old man watched, dumbfounded, as the two clashed in a fierce battle, hurling lightning and fire in every direction. Yi He charged with full force, leaving the dragon with only 3 heads. He then fired an atomic beam that destroyed the creature, taking the beast's heart for himself. The old man watched the scene as if he couldn't believe his eyes. As he began to explore the giant heart, Yi He felt his arm melt from the intense heat. After examining it carefully, he found what he was looking for, a circle of wires that quickly wrapped around his body. Thus, he acquired an impressive suit of armor, becoming the first in 1,000 years to fully wear the model. At first, the old man was enraged, but he soon recognized that the young man was worthy. Yi He then decided he needed a 2.0 expansion for the new armor. He concluded that only with this upgrade could he withstand the power of the technique contained within the suit, and that he would not leave that world without it. 7 days later, Yi He was resting when his phone rang. It was Chu Zhou, informing him that the director wanted to deliver the reward for the county mission. However, the young man looked like a zombie, utterly exhausted from his intense training with the dragon armor. In the college's tallest tower, Yi He was greeted by Secretary Nuwa. He immediately immediately sensed something strange about her aura, but followed her to meet the director. The secretary, noticing the young man's curiosity, decided to reveal her true nature. She was a kind of cyborg with a human head, designed to appear more friendly. Yi found the university's technology interesting and continued to follow her until they reached the director's floor. Suddenly, the young man felt something different in his mind, and in the next instant, he was already sitting in an armchair in the room. Director Shin offered him tea, and Yi grew curious about the technique the man had used to modulate time. Shin confirmed he possessed this ability, which made Yi understand how he had managed to save Yachting during their fight. Next, the director revealed the rewards for the level 5 mission, but Yi stated that his main interest was gaining access to the Prometheus files. To his surprise, the director raised no objections, leaving him quite intrigued. Yi followed the director to a room that housed half of a giant brain. Shin explained that the organ was responsible for Nua's artificial intelligence, and that decades ago, it had belonged to the Prometheus project. Yi was shocked to discover that the brain was part of the first demon ever captured alive. The director then asked Nua to export the data to a flash drive and handed it to the young man, who now had a kind of personal assistant to consult about anything he wanted. Director Shin's trust was so surreal that Yi began to think there might be a conspiracy afoot. Meanwhile, in another part of the college, the student Xiang was increasing his power through martial meditation, feeling like the strongest student in the entire institution. Upon leaving, he came face to face with Yi and assumed the newcomer was there to surrender to him. Yi, finding the young man presumptuous, explained that his only interest was using the training room. Annoyed, Xiang made a point of displaying his aura to intimidate him. Tired of his insistence, Yi simply struck him with a powerful blow, as he just wanted to train in peace. In the training room, Yi consumed all the cores he had collected. He was pleased with the Nua AI, which made his college life much easier. At his command, the artificial intelligence activated the room's nuclear energy shield, allowing him to ingest the power pills. His level began to increase exponentially, enveloping him in a cocoon resembling a crystal coffin. When this structure shattered, the king of monsters would be revealed. Meanwhile, the day for the reconquest of Xia had arrived. Countless warriors mobilized for the mission alongside the director, who watched his enormous contingent from above. The leader then let out a war cry, and the soldiers responded by igniting the cosmos in their hearts, raising their martial chi to the heavens while the director inflamed their souls with a speech worthy of a war leader. Far away, Yi was finalizing his transformation process, like a caterpillar about to become a butterfly. At Laserbird, Supervisor Yu Yan pondered their recent failures. She saw the reconquest of Xia as a perfect opportunity to display her power, since the attention of the Bird and Dragon Division was focused on the mission. Her plan was to release a monster with a golden gene at its core, capable of finding something that was lost. With this in mind, she opened a heavily locked door, revealing a pod that both fed and contained such an abomination. A plane carrying the monster's capsule was heading towards Xicheng, under the command of a hard-boiled captain whose mission was to find the lost golden gene. Suddenly, the aircraft began to lose control, and the captain revealed himself as a traitor to Laserbird, mercilessly eliminating his subordinates. Inside the capsule, the monster smelled the scent of death. The captain, who was actually working for Bei Baidun, fed the creature the hearts of the Grandmaster-level warriors. Feeling like a trainer feeding a dog, he realized the beast wanted more. Since retrieving the gene was no longer in his interest, the captain ordered the monster to wreak havoc in Xia. Then, he abandoned the plane, leaving the creature to finish its meal and go on the attack. The capsule finally burst, and the bloodthirsty monster felt the pleasure of freedom as it began to devour everything around it. Meanwhile, the bombings began in Xicheng. Another winged beast tried to attack the aircraft, but the devouring monster charged at it without hesitation and annihilated it in a matter of seconds. Through this act, the creature grew an imposing wing and multiple eyes, which allowed it to recognize various types of genes, as if they were a vast banquet laid out before it. The warriors ran towards the falling plane, confident that the redhead Liu would handle any beast that crossed their path. However, they soon spotted a creature devouring several monsters, as if at an all-you-can-eat buffet. The being seemed pleased that the warriors had taken its bait, and the fight between them began. The warrior Zhang's blows, however, seemed to cause no damage to the enemy's surface. To the horror of the others, they saw him being devoured. Enraged, Liu charged at the creature, but the monster struck her with a blow she recognized as Zhang's. Suddenly, she heard her friend's voice emerge from dark tentacles, which formed from an image of his agonizing face, begging for help. The sight left the warrior petrified, and she was quickly overcome by the monster's power. The creature then used Liu's body to infiltrate the other warriors, aiming to discover where the golden gene was. On another battlefront, a Lord-class beast was confronted by an imposing knight who easily defeated it with his pointed weapon. He was Chen Tianyu, the director of the Huadu Academy of Master Grains. He was talking with Dai Qiming, the student council president, about the safest route route to the sovereign beast's nest. Dai Qiming, however, thought they should not act rashly and proposed that they meditate on the situation. During his meditation, he glimpsed the arrival of an egg that exploded on the ground like a meteor. From it emerged the imposing sovereign beast, which led the director to immediately order all warriors to get into formation. The director advanced with his spear, but the beast retaliated with a powerful punch. Suddenly, a mage who moved like a genie from a lamp pierced the enemy's arm, creating an opening for the leader's attack. Realizing the human's strategy, the monster decided to eliminate the elder mage first, but another warrior protected him with his shield. Next, a yin-yang controller attacked, sealing the creature's movements. Seizing the opportunity, the heroes transported the monster to another reality, where they attacked it en masse and destroyed its head. However, the creature was a sovereign and the king of monsters, so it began another transformation and charged once more. It launched a fireball that struck the warriors, knocking them down like bowling pins. The director counterattacked with a thunder spear, but the monster, which resembled a horned insect, hurled the shield warrior to a dragon as if he were a meal. Finally, it grabbed the director and began to choke him, while scoffing at his squad, claiming they were no match for all the sovereigns in Xicheng. On the city's east side, the ship's admiral monitored the battle against another monster that had just evolved into the sovereign class amidst the buildings. Facing the threat, he ordered the evacuation of the ground troops to prepare for the launch of nuclear warheads. Suddenly, a tentacle shot out towards the ship, which fired a magnetic cannon to sever the protruding limb. However, the tentacle regenerated instantly. With little time, the officer launched the piercing warheads, which exploded in the ground. The man hoped that the warriors had managed to get out of the area safe and sound. One of the agents even confirmed the absence of the sovereign's vital signs, but the relief was short-lived, as the monster soon recovered from the blast, leaving the officer hopeless. At that moment, an alert was issued, ordering everyone to evacuate the area, as an intercontinental missile with life signs had been detected. It was Yi He, surfing on the giant projectile with a determined expression. A few minutes earlier, the protagonist had completed his evolution under the supervision of Nuwa, who had fitted the young man with a nano-armor provided by Qing Long. It was then that Yi He realized he was already late for the battle, and set off towards the conflict, traveling on the missile. As he drew closer, he launched the projectile at the monster and activated the power of the abode. The arrival of a grandmaster renewed the agent's hopes, while the monster's true face was discovered by Yi He, who delivered a celestial strike with the moon as his witness. At the same time, Wu Hong's body and shield were destroyed, but President Chen Tianyu continued to resist, forcing the sovereign to use its third mutation. Faced with this, the president decided to launch another attack against the creature, which blocked it with ease. As a sign of respect, the monster promised that after the knight's death, it would evolve him into a more powerful form. As for the others who were still alive, it decided it would pulverize them without remorse. It was then that Wu Hong rose, taking on a bizarre and alien-like form, which the sovereign noted was an influence of ancient demonic experiments. The shield man began a transformation with tentacles and introduced himself as the Negative, stating that he was willing to devour the sovereign monster. He, however, began to punch the alien, but his hands were engulfed by tentacles that began to corrode his body. Realizing he was in a trap, he was completely swallowed by the Negative, who then commented that he would need an antacid to complete the digestion. The warriors seized the opportunity to flee and save Director Chen, but a comet-shaped energy tore through the sky and exploded upon the alien. Yi He had arrived to help. He then unleashed a nuclear Hadouken and flew high into the air with the creature, performing a terrestrial throw that all but buried it in the ground. Despite the attack, the monster rose, revealing that it now possessed the compatibility of the sovereign insect it had just swallowed. Yi He unleashed a kick that sent the monster spinning through the air and crashing into a building. Despite this, the creature rose to its feet and boldly asked if he was finished. Yi He liked that audacity and answered with another nuclear blow, which left the warriors present stunned. They wondered who this individual was who had arrived with such power. However, the monster possessed the ability to split and only grew stronger with Yi He's attacks. The creature also noticed that its opponent contained a supreme gene, and for that reason, decided to devour him with all its might, altering its own form to transform into an even larger being. In response, Yi He activated his dragon arm and unleashed a punch powerful enough to part the sea. The blow struck the enemy dead on, forcing it to revert to its humanoid form. Even so, the monster managed to unleash a genetic blast. However, Yi He reappeared amidst the smoke, protected by Zaza, and commented that he had yet to show the peak of his power. The monster advanced first, unleashing a series of blows based on the abilities of the creatures it had devoured over time, but none of them were able to take down the hero. Seeing that Yi He couldn't defeat it either, the creature proposed they divide the planet so that neither would lose. In response, Yi He claimed he would only need 10 minutes to destroy the loud-mouthed monster, who became incredulous at the declaration and wondered how he could accomplish such a feat. Taking advantage of the hesitation, Yi grabbed the monster and took it into hyperspace, intending to deliver his final blow without damaging the planet. The strategy was effective, as the enemy was already weakened from having used several of its husks during the fight. Furthermore, at a considerable distance from the planet, the consciousnesses of the creatures it had devoured stopped responding, leaving it with virtually a single life. In an act of insanity, the creature self-destructed to prevent Yi from eliminating all of its fragmented parts. In response, Yi grew in size to capture every drop of the monster's blood, crushing it without giving it a chance to escape. He then compressed the remains into a small sphere and swallowed it. Next, he unleashed the power of the Lord of Flames, raising his internal temperature to a stellar level and imploding the monster within his own core. On the planet, Dai Qiming was speaking with headquarters about the war's situation. He expressed his gratitude for the arrival of the mysterious warrior who had saved them from a worse fate. His conversation led him to discover that the savior was from Huadu, which intrigued him as he had never met him before. Meanwhile, Yi returned to the planet's atmosphere like a comet, testing the power of the negative. Through the supreme vampire evolution, he had managed to refine his new form, acquiring the ability to shape himself into whatever he wanted. Feeling invincible, Yi flew over the city. At the same time, a commander from the Baton Nation was observing the trails left by Yi as he entered the atmosphere. The agents of that federation were in disbelief to find that the detected activity, similar to an explosion, still showed vital signs. These signs belonged to Yi in his supreme form. Rudely, Yi made an obscene gesture toward the commander. Simultaneously, the agents detected an energy concentration so intense it terrified the commander. Then Yi blew up the nation's satellites, which had been spying on his country. He realized his new power could cover the entire planet, so he expanded his magnetic field to check on the other civilizations that had been overrun by the beasts. His reach extended as far as Guanshan City, where humanity had stood no chance against an S-rank kingdom. On Xiaodong Island, inside an imposing palace, a sickly-looking monster was being given medicine by enslaved humans. The Monster King seemed worried, wondering what human force would dare to attempt a retake. On the western continent, the people witnessed a miracle in the holy city, where a man floated above a statue, seemingly ready to atone for his mistakes. Meanwhile, in a frozen sea, an icebreaker was pushing forward. Its captain seemed familiar with the protagonist's name and deeds, and he blamed a blue-haired man for delaying his recovery and return to action. Amidst all this, the protagonist realized he was also being watched. Faced with this scene of war, for a moment he came to the conclusion that Fu Hongsheng, the greatest warrior of all time, might be betraying humanity. Yi flew to Kulin Peak, a place known for its ability to suppress any kind of power and secret realms. Upon arriving, he noticed no signs of battle in the vicinity and decided to search for the powerful Fu Hongsheng. He felt confident, as his models were already operating at maximum capacity. He thought that if the planet had no heroes left, he himself would take on that responsibility. As he walked through the empty city, Yi knew someone was stalking him. Suddenly, he was struck by a blue beam, and a giant worm emerged before him. The protagonist reacted swiftly, executing the mental slash ability, which split the creature in two. The act revealed an aura resting within the monster, from which the doctor emerged, completely covered in a slime that nearly made Yi gag. The doctor explained that he had hidden inside the worm because Laserbird had sent a sinister monster to retrieve the golden gene. Yi calmly revealed that he had already subdued the creature, causing the man in the lab coat to stand in awe of his power. Next, the doctor showed the gene to Yi, who felt an overwhelming urge to consume it, but decided against it for the moment to avoid entering a state of hibernation. Thanking him for a job well done, Yi struck the doctor in the heart, injecting the negative's biomass to make him stronger. Shortly after, he grew a crystal carapace on his own back, removed it, and offered it to the man so he could evolve. The doctor reacted with childlike emotion, beginning to cry. However, Yi had no time for drama and ordered him to continue his work, stating that he would take care of clearing out the entire city himself. With the sovereign in the east slain, the warriors fought against the already weakened beasts. The battle raged on until they heard the artificial intelligence, Nuwa, order everyone to leave the city for Yi, a command they promptly obeyed. However, their retreat was interrupted by the sudden arrival of Yi, who emerged with his tentacles and activated a weapons module to decimate the enemies. The military watched in disbelief, realizing he was a true one-man army. Suddenly, Yi's weapons shut down due to overheating. Seizing the opportunity, the commander ordered his men to assist, providing cover by launching super-powered missiles. The power of the weaponry was so great that even the monsters seemed to acknowledge humanity's technological evolution. As soon as Yi's weapons cooled down and came back online, the beasts were once again targeted from all sides, but the system overheated a second time. Taking advantage of the new malfunction, the three-headed wolf ordered its hordes to attack. At the same time, the command center detected the approach of more Lord-level beasts, making the situation even more dire. Faced with the new threat, the retreat retreating warriors decided to stay and help Yi He. However, before they could act, an intense light emanated from the protagonist's weapons pod, eliminating all the remaining monsters and leaving none for the other warriors. Then, Yi He rose up on his wings, ready to save the world. For saving the city, Yi He had received another model, which motivated him to save all the others and claim the full rewards. The population celebrated the fact that 3 cities had already been recovered. However, when the news broke that the West City had been retaken by director Chen Tianyu, Liu Qingju grew curious, as she recognized the blue light that emanated from the location. At the command center, the minister ordered that Yi He's identity be kept secret. Shortly after, Yi He himself showed up at the headquarters to ask for a favor. The minister showed such reverence that he nearly kissed his feet, and then Yi He requested his head student identification. In the minister's eyes, the young man was already stronger than President Xin Jingwen, but he still called the student council president to grant Yi He the title. The latter promptly approached and thanked Yi He for his help on behalf of the entire college, leaving the young man a bit embarrassed. The formality was worth it, as the title granted him more evolution power. With it, he acquired the A-class monster, the Hellstar, a massive creature capable of blocking out the sun and possessing other remarkable abilities. This made Yi He eager to fuse it with Demora. Meanwhile, in Qincheng City, a group of warriors lamented having recovered only 2 counties in a single day. The difficulty was due to the area being infested with rodent beasts that hid in places, preventing a pitched battle for their extermination. The situation became more frustrating when they received a notification that 2 more cities had been retaken. The group's leader became indignant, stating that it was impossible to hunt their sovereign by going through such narrow tunnels. Yi He, however, was ready to retake it stealthily. His decision was driven primarily by the disappearance of the 3 top leaders, a consequence of Fu Hongsheng's betrayal. Yi He couldn't understand why the traitor wished to weaken their own nation, but he was certain that only he could fight against Hongsheng. To do so, however, he would need to evolve much more, and retaking the city of Qincheng presented itself as the perfect opportunity. Upon arriving, Yi He noticed that the city was infested with nebulous forms that prevented him from locating the enemy sovereign. However, the hero had an ace up his sleeve and unleashed a power that acted as a tracker. His ability invaded the sewers, unleashing tentacles capable of consuming those rodent-like creatures. With his forces being eliminated, the sovereign finally revealed himself. He expressed his indignation at what he considered human insolence for sending only 1 warrior, and declared that he would crush the hero. In response to the creature's despair, Yi He simply raised his hand and created a vortex, an attack he named Divine Punishment. The rat sovereign tried to retreat, but Yi He wouldn't let it escape, trapping it with his energy tentacles. Then, the power of the attack crashed down on the creature, disintegrating its body. However, as one would expect from a leader, its core remained intact. When Yi He approached to take it, the core split into several small rats that began to flee. Faced with the situation, the protagonist turned to Zaza, who froze time for the creatures. This allowed Yi He to see the core of each one and continue the hunt for the true leader. The rats then gathered and merged into an embryonic form, which sucked all the others into itself. The creature was reborn, traumatized by Yi He, and fled toward the domain of sin. Upon arriving, it hurled itself toward the portal that would take it back home. An immense purple light covered the sky, prompting the city's warriors to investigate what had happened. Upon their arrival, they found that all the rats had vanished, sparking curiosity about who could have summoned such immense power. The citizens remained hopeful, as 4 cities had already been reclaimed in just 1 week. However, high-ranking officials were concerned, unsure of who was pushing back the monsters so effectively. Meanwhile, Yi He headed for Bocheng, a place where information about the battles was always vague. He also decided to alter his appearance during combat, transforming into a sinister creature and making his sword take the form of a malevolent scythe. Yi He resolved to use this new identity to focus on the assassination arts he had learned from his master Gong Kei. He set off for a city where the people were acting strangely. Yi He deduced that the local sovereign was using illusion techniques, which explained the lack of alarm about the fighting in the region. Upon investigating the inhabitants, he realized they had all been turned into zombies and found the sovereign's actions outrageous. Using one of his techniques on a body, Yi He tried to find out what kind of monster had done this to the people. The woman, though dead, revealed that the sovereign had even killed the local chairman. As her body deteriorated, she mentioned that only a grandmaster could defeat their leader. After the revelation, the warrior finally rested in peace, and Yi He swore to avenge her, determined to exterminate them all. Yi He activated his magnetic field to hunt the sovereign, but could only detect the zombies roaming the area. He then unleashed his dark aura to the 4 corners of the city, trapping several monsters in his path, until he noticed a secluded mountain where he finally found the boss. Upon being located, the sovereign ordered his zombie warriors to attack Yi He, treating him as if he were the villain of the story. An immense vortex formed in the sky, drawing the monster's attention. Taking advantage of the distraction, Yi-He descended through the clouds and eliminated them all. Angered that his plan had been foiled, the sovereign launched a powerful strike against the hero, who, however, remained unscathed. It was then Yi-He's turn to attack, but he too was unable to harm the enemy. In response, the boss punched Yi-He square in the face. The blow shattered his mask. Then, the sovereign continued to beat the protagonist like a punching bag until Yi-He felt the enemy's full force in the pit of his stomach. This time, the blow caused a sharp pain. However, it was all a trap to lure the sovereign into the killing intent dimension. There, Yi-He relentlessly attacked the monster with his scythe. Despite the damage taken, the enemy was now motivated to possess the protagonist's body as well. Yi-He attacked again, but the sovereign blocked the blow with his golden, indestructible bracer, knocking the hero back. However, Yi-He also felt motivated and unleashed a sequence of slashing strikes he had learned from his master, hitting his opponent in several spots as if tenderizing meat for a barbecue. Then, the Zawarudo technique was used to envelop the monster in an energy sphere. With that, Yi-He absorbed another power style for his collection, finally managing to unlock an S-rank monster. The creature looked like a legendary alien tree with absurd powers, leaving Yi-He as ecstatic as a kid getting a PlayStation 5. Yi-He's excitement grew even more when the system informed him that the 10-headed Gina could fuse with the Demora. This fusion had the potential to increase his power to infinity, mainly because it contained the golden gene at its core. Realizing this was his chance to defeat Fu Hongsheng, he immediately performed the fusion. Next, Yi-He spoke with one of the zombies, who revealed the existence of an emperor of all beasts, a being capable of using master grain techniques. Worry washed over Yi-He upon learning that this new enemy was on its way to Huadu, which was left completely defenseless with its masters away at war. Meanwhile, in the secret realm in Nine Dragons River, there was a Huadu base where they could lower the level of beasts from B to D. The atmosphere was completely relaxed, with the warriors enjoying a barbecue. They were so complacent that even old Zhao, the one on watch duty, abandoned his post to join the party, which is why no one noticed the intruders' arrival. The invaders were led by one of the 4 generals of the Monster Emperor. His mission was to massacre and weaken the warriors' life force, following a list given to him by Fu Hongsheng. The ultimate goal was to make everyone bow before the emperor's power. Swiftly, the invaders wiped out the men of Huadu in the secret realm. As they tried to cross the rift, one of them nearly lost a foot to the protection created by the human experts. To bypass the system, they used the remains of weak monsters, and thus managed to cross over to the Blue Planet. In the Council of the 9 Families of Huadu, the elders were discussing Nuwa's announcement, which called for the master's return to the city. They had been worried about the disappearance of their top warriors for some time, and imagined that Fu Hongsheng was in seclusion to increase his power. The situation infuriated one of the elders over the warriors' individual quests for power, and the council decided to devise a strategy as soon as the masters returned. Meanwhile, in Nine Dragons River, a torrent rose from the sea, blackening the water and killing the fish. The humans grew fearful, thinking it might be a new rift, until the monster arrived. With a single blow, he slaughtered the citizens, judging them weaker than a fly. At the command center, the agents fell into despair at the arrival of a sovereign in the imperial capital. The director of Longquai, Wang Ziting, ordered everyone to be notified while he awaited Fu Hongsheng's return. 4 masters from Huadu confronted the sovereign monster, who felt like laughing at such audacity. He told the masters to flee, explaining that he was only there to hunt the strong. However, the group's mission was to buy time, so they joined forces to fight the enemy. The attack, however, didn't even tickle the monster, who responded with a swift and painless move. Aircraft went into action, but nothing seemed to faze the robotic-looking monster. The situation changed with the arrival of more advanced warriors from Longquai, and the enemy seemed pleased to finally face high-ranking martial artists. However, every attack launched against the tyrant only resulted in another casualty for the defenders. Director Wang trembled with each new report on the losses, outraged by the lack of support from the other organizations. In desperation, he decided to activate an emergency protocol called Special Registry Combat Power. One of his agents tried to dissuade him, but his mind was already made up. And so, 3 sinister-looking warriors were unleashed to deal with the threat. The monster, however, seemed more interested in the City of Clouds, the source of a martial power it found far more appealing. Despite this, one of the warriors, who resembled a mummy, was eager to face the sovereign again, just like in the old days. The creature then conjured its power of extermination, revealing heads on its arms as the trio prepared for combat. The sovereign lunged forward with a devastating strike, unleashing a battle cry that sounded like Mahakala, its meaning unknown. The monster remarked to the heads on its arms that it had hoped the warrior in the City of Clouds would be stronger than the trio they were facing. One of the heads, with a bulging eye, showed its eagerness to begin the destruction. They then advanced on the tall buildings, which promptly activated their protective shields. Another head, with fish-like eyes, shouted that resistance was futile. In response, the soldiers fired missiles at the enemy, but they failed to stop it. Suddenly, the sovereign could no longer feel the presence of the warrior it was seeking in the city. It was at that moment that Master Gong Kei appeared to face it, unleashing her deadly slashes with extreme speed. The monster promptly responded with the deadly corrosion wind strike, and the master realized the battle would be difficult. The heads, now dismembered by her attacks, were certain they had found a worthy opponent. Gong Kei acknowledged their recognition and, without hesitation, launched a new assault, pulling the sovereign into the dimension of murderous intent. Even in this place, the monster tried to strike her, but she dodged and reappeared behind the creature. She then executed the blood-rending slash, causing blood bubbles to begin completely engulfing the sovereign. The master simply watched as the red lines from her strike acted like a shredder, tearing the monster apart at a speed so absurd it prevented its regeneration. Even wounded, the creature recognized her as a worthy opponent. Suddenly, the monster felt a weight on its body, realizing that several zombies were climbing on it. As an evolved creature, however, it soon understood that it was all just an illusion. Impatient, Gong was unwilling to wait, and neither was the monster, already recovered, as it prepared a new Mahakala attack. The girl, however, wasn't worried, and even took out her phone to record the fight, intending to show it to Yi Hei. She then unleashed the Guillotine of Millions strike on the enemy, trapping it with chains as well. At that moment, Gong noticed her own body was disappearing, an effect of the monster's attack. The guillotine, however, fell before the effect was complete, and she returned to her normal form in the nick of time. The monster also regenerated and considered the master harder to defeat than Fu Hongsheng had been. Then, the creature began another bizarre transformation. The master realized the fight was getting truly serious, and that she might even die. For a moment, she tried to look on the bright side, imagining the honors she would receive, but when faced with the monster's sword, she felt she still had too much to live for. She attacked the enemy with all her strength, until she noticed the presence of another warrior who seemed ready to change the course of the battle. At the Longquei headquarters, everyone was apprehensive about the course of the battle in Huadu, as a vortex had engulfed the city of clouds. Inside, a masked man stood before the sovereign. The latter wished to know his opponent's name, and received only the word monster in reply, which left both the Eye of Tandera and Master Gong intrigued. Then, the sovereign charged at the mysterious man, but was hit squarely in the face by a nuclear explosion. The protagonist behind the mask, Yi He, was merely testing the impact of the 10-headed Gina. The sovereign, in turn, seemed to enjoy finding a worthy challenger and threw himself into the fight. However, with his Gina eyes activated, Yi He perceived his adversary's movements in slow motion. Determined to test the techniques of his new S-rank model, Yi He created several refined cell clones that surrounded the enemy, all with the same attack power as the original. The sovereign was terrified, and then lost his ability to move with the invocation of Zawarudo. Seizing the opportunity, Yi He unleashed a powerful combination of nuclear attacks against him. The energy released was so immense that it seemed as if a second sun had appeared in the sky. Gradually, however, the temperature returned to normal as the clones dissolved. The director of Longquei watched, wondering when Yi He had become so powerful. Yi He acknowledged the monster's resilience for having survived an attack of such magnitude. Then, the sovereign began to restore his body using the demonic sphere, but the hero found the act far too audacious. He grabbed the monster by the ear and dragged him away from Huadu, stating that he would show him how to create a third sun. Realizing Yi Hei's strength, the sovereign invited him to abandon his humanity and join the emperor, promising that in a few decades he could become the fifth in the imperial hierarchy. Yi He, however, found the idea of having to wait so long to be among the top 5 outrageous. He then threw the monster against the mountains, revealing that he had stopped being human a long time ago. With that, now outside of Huadu, the protagonist activated the full power of his Demora. The sovereign, who had never witnessed such power, saw Yi He as a real threat to his emperor, and decided he would not give up on annihilating him so easily. The two forces clashed, and the sovereign landed, still balanced, but his foot came down on something slimy. Yi He explained that it was a kind of sap, a result of the union between the Gina and his abode. The substance began to envelop the sovereign's body until he became part of Yi He, now obeying his will. His submission was total, like a dog wagging its tail to fetch a ball. Meanwhile, in Longquei, word was spreading about a mysterious figure who was hunting sovereigns in the war. The director questioned if the masked man's goal was to help save the world, but his assistant stated that, according to Nua, the man's profile indicated only a desire to defeat all sovereigns. Soon after, Gong Kei made a video call with the director and revealed that the mysterious man belonged to an organization called Monstro and used the codename Demonic Eye. The revelation was so shocking it made the hair the bald director didn't have stand on end. As Wang tried to grasp the motives behind the organization's appearance, a luminous object materialized over Huadu City. Experts identified the presence as the sovereign Asura, though its aura felt different. They then spotted Yi He on the enormous monster's shoulder, a sight that terrified Director Wang, especially since he now had to rely on an unknown organization to save the planet. Meanwhile, news of the attack on the capital, Huadu, spread, and the head of the student council confirmed that several high-level warriors had been struck down there, indicating that the entire world was in grave danger. Far away on Liuli Island, the head of the Kai family awaited the landing of an aircraft. A sheriff-like man disembarked, having come from across the ocean to close a deal with the family head. In the meantime, Yi He christened his monster Hook, making it the first member of the Monstro organization. With the world in a state of chaos, he decided to build his own army, but he camouflaged the robot to avoid drawing unnecessary attention. Shortly after, Yi He found himself staring at a tree, which suddenly began to gaze back at him with curiosity, startling him with its sudden animation. When Yi He went to punch the tree, he discovered it was the mad scientist in disguise. He revealed that he had created the entire forest with biotechnology, which made Yi He quite proud of his work. Next, the doctor showed him the base he had built in less than a month, and Yi He was impressed by how quickly the scientist had accomplished everything. He discovered that to secure funding, the doctor had used his healing ability to extort money from wealthy people on the verge of death, as well as turning influential targets into vampires to aid the monster organization. Yi He authorized the scientist to continue with his methods, on the condition that he wouldn't use torture techniques like those of Laserbird. The man then showed him a laboratory where he kept scientists from Laser and Prometheus, whom he had turned into servants to accelerate research development. Yi He noticed that the doctor's cyborg form was just a manifestation controlled through a proxy, as his true self had become a brain connected to various pieces of equipment, eliminating the need to expend energy on a physical body. The protagonist even thought about how the doctor and the AI Nua would make a good pair. Afterward, Yi He introduced Hook to the doctor, and forbade him from performing any kind of experiment on the giant. Next, he was taken to a large aquarium that housed an imposing fish named Artificial Demora, capable of generating nuclear-level power. Satisfied with what he saw, Yi He decided to grant the scientist a sample of his YH cells for further research. In gratitude, the doctor bowed. With everything settled, the hero considered it was time to return to Huadu. The plan to retake Xia had been a tremendous success, but a new order had been established in the city, with a curfew and food rationing. Yi He noticed the place was different, though it had recovered quickly from the battle. He then asked Nua to take him to the Longquay headquarters, where he would have his first day as an intern. Upon entering the headquarters, however, he found the place empty. He was soon greeted by Agent Lin Ju, who seemed quite grumpy. She pointed to the desk that would be his, and when Yi He asked if she was alone, the agent explained that she was. Due to the heavy losses in the battle and with other warriors guarding the borders, she had ended up overwhelmed with all the work. To try and cheer up his new colleague, Yi He took one of his brain activation wormlings and discreetly poured it into the agent's tea, considering its effect better than guarana powder. As the agent drank her tea, satisfied, an emergency call came in, reporting riots in the city. The news irritated her, as she had been planning to go out to eat. Seeing an opportunity to prove his worth, Yi He offered to go in her place. Lin was hesitant to send the intern on a mission, but he assured her she could trust him. Suddenly, the veteran agent began to smell a pleasant aroma in the air. Before her, the image of a marvelous banquet appeared. Even realizing it was an illusion, she accepted it. Yi He commented that he had merely taken advantage of her fatigue for the ability to work. However, Lin explained that elite agents receive training against this type of power. She admitted, though, that Yi He's ability to create illusions was on a level that no Xuanwu warrior could face. Finally, she told him to be careful on the mission, as she wouldn't be responsible if anything bad happened to him. Before the woman could even finish speaking, Yi He departed in a hurry, but not before leaving behind an energy drink and a note so she could regain her strength. A gesture that she surprisingly found cute. Xia's border with the southwest region was in chaos. Yi He, disguised as Muhammad, was on a bus, using his techniques to ignore the foul smell of the place. The news reported that special forces had eliminated some terrorists involved in rebellions. Faced with the situation, Yi He decided he would act discreetly to cut the evil out by the root. The journey was interrupted when a van blocked the bus's path. Two suspicious men entered the vehicle with the clear intention of robbing everyone. Terrified, the passengers rushed to the back, leaving Yi He squeezed like a sardine in a can. One of the criminals demanded that everyone cooperate. Then, two more burly men who were tattoo artists climbed aboard. The group's leader then announced that everyone would be forced to get the heart symbol tattoo he displayed on his chest. Yi He immediately recognized the tattoo, which Nua had already shown him, and considered it disrespectful to force citizens to wear it. At that moment, a brave elderly passenger tried to confront the bandits. In response, one of the criminals decided to punish the old man without mercy, but as he tried to strike, the blade deflected and hit the arm of the group's own leader. The leader glared furiously at his accomplice and asked if he was trying to rebel. Stammering, the man explained it hadn't been his intention and that the knife seemed to have moved on its own. The boss didn't accept the excuse and ordered the brutish tattoo artist to eliminate the unwitting traitor. To everyone's surprise, including his own, the skinny subordinate easily defeated the two men. Outraged, the boss ordered the rest of the gang to get on the bus and capture him. The citizens watched, bewildered, as every bandit who boarded was thrown out of the vehicle. Even after defeating the entire group, the subordinate insisted it wasn't his fault. Suddenly, he lunged at the boss, dragged him back to the van like a misbehaving child, and drove off, leaving the passengers completely baffled as to what had just happened. The bandit's van drove down the road, its driver looking like a zombie behind the wheel. The group's leader realized his subordinate was being controlled, and trying to pass himself off as a servant, asked Yi what he desired. Meditating like a guru, Yi requested information about the gang. The leader hesitated, knowing that any wrong answer would put him in a difficult situation, especially with Yi right there in the vehicle. Meanwhile, the van was heading dangerously toward a cliff. Faced with the leader's lies, Yi decided to eliminate the bandits, launching his tentacles at him. The man still begged for justice, but Yi stated he was no hero and allowed his dark tentacles to devour the criminals. After getting rid of them, he used his abilities to transform the old van into a supercar, equipped with the artificial intelligence system, Manhwa. Though he wasn't Batman, he had created his own Batmobile. He then ordered the AI to head to Chen City and create a new identity for him, that of a rich and ostentatious young man. The car departed immediately, following the optimal route. At the same time, at the headquarters of the Arrowed Heart Gang, important members of the Bloodthorns organization were plotting to cause unrest in society. They were wary, as the Longquay organization had implemented a strict defense in the area. However, one of the women in the group believed it was the perfect opportunity to act. She explained that young Master Yi, a billionaire heir known for his ostentation, was very influential in high society, and the Bloodthorns could take advantage of his money. Another member of the group considered that it might be a trap, but the woman suggested they take the risk anyway. Faced with this, the leader decided they would go to Chen City to meet this so-called playboy. However, Yi was already one step ahead, in possession of each of their criminal records. When his servant informed him that the trio wanted a meeting, he authorized it, deducing that they were practically asking to die. The members of the Bloodthorn organization went to the city, but the blonde woman in the group felt a steady gaze upon them. She also noticed that the people around them were strangely calm. Suddenly, the car braked sharply, and the group decided to retreat, while the zombies, who were the local inhabitants, simply watched their dinner get away. The blonde then told her companions she'd had a vision of her own death, alongside theirs. The men were irritated that she hadn't revealed this sooner, claiming that if they had known, they wouldn't have even come to this place. However, the woman reassured them, explaining that in her vision, their deaths happened in a forest, and their current surroundings were completely urban. At that moment, a small red flower began to emerge from the car's ceiling, revealing itself to be one of Yi's cells, capable of projecting his consciousness. Immediately, Yi used his power to create a sea of trees that seized the terrorist's vehicle. He then introduced himself as the master of her fate, and she recognized the scene as the same one from her premonition. She watched one of her companions, a man with dreadlocks trapped in the wreckage, begging for help, as the other had already died on impact. The woman simply replied that one could not escape fate, and moments later, the car exploded with the man still inside. The blonde closed her eyes, accepting her death. However, a drop of blood trickled down Yi's finger. He then offered to spare the young woman's life on the condition that she sell her soul and her body to him. The woman then drank the blood from his finger, promptly becoming another of his servants. However, she began to writhe, having been too greedy, and scales resembling Yi's armor appeared on her body. He took advantage of the connection to enter her mind and learn more about the Bloodthorn organization, whose leader was cautiously hiding in a submarine. The blonde bowed before Yi, who produced 15 of his clones to accompany her to the terrorist base and eliminate everyone. In the following month, news began to circulate about the end of the rebellions and a crime rate that had dropped to almost zero. Only the police knew of the existence of a warrior who hunted criminals, even sending confidential files to the military. Meanwhile, Yi flew over the open sea, but his magnetic field detected nothing resembling a submarine. He knew, however, that it was only a matter of time until he found his target. Thus, he unleashed the full form of the Demora into the ocean, beginning the hunt by emitting gamma cells. Finally, he located his target, a saber ship gliding slowly through the depths. The ship's crew detected the presence of something enormous approaching. The captain ordered the use of sound waves to drive the creature away, but the attempt was unsuccessful. The officer in charge then warned that the intruder would close in within 5 minutes. In response, the ship launched trident torpedoes that crashed against the Demora, but it continued to advance, unaffected. The creature slammed into the vessel, causing irreparable damage to its hull. In response, the captain ordered the launch of all remaining torpedoes, but none could prevent Demora from unleashing its power and wiping out the crew. It was then that Garrett, the leader of the Bloodthorn and an S-rank specialist, went to face the monster. Furious at seeing his legacy destroyed by a demonic beast, he grabbed a nuclear battery and hurled it at Demora, who simply swallowed the projectile. Garrett waited eagerly, expecting the enemy to be blown to pieces. However, when the bomb exploded internally, the creature merely let out a burp and asked if there was any antacid nearby. The leader was dumbfounded by what he had just witnessed. Next, it was the monster's turn to attack, unleashing sonic waves that left Garrett extremely dazed. Still, the S-rank master did not give up easily and made tentacles sprout from his back. In response, Demora released a gas in his face, paralyzing his body as if he were trapped in goo. Soon after, Garrett was consumed by bubbles that exploded with atomic energy, extinguishing his last gasps of hope. After the battle, Demora glided across the water's surface, its destination the southeast triangle, in search of Yi He. Meanwhile, in the country of Fei, a guard was observing the sea horizon with his binoculars when he noticed something different, a shape that looked like a huge island moving at high speed. Despair washed over the guards when they realized the shape was a sea beast. Another torpedo boat approached to provide support, but Demora unleashed its cosmic nuclear attack, which disintegrated the ship and triggered a gigantic wave that swept over the command tower. At Fei's military command center, an emergency alert was issued for a sovereign beast. The general ordered the launch of all kinds of projectiles and bombs before the creature could make landfall. Suddenly, however, the monster's signal vanished from the radars, leaving the high-ranking officer perplexed. Meanwhile, Demora dodged the traps, determined to destroy the military, and unleashed its power on the country's fleet, blasting it all to pieces. The commander of one of the vessels watched the beast approach, and soon after, his own ship also began to sink. In a matter of minutes, all the vessels had been destroyed. Demora's attack on the country of Fei and the neighboring nations was then made official. When the monster reached Nidonia, the region's strongest warrior prepared to defend the country, but he too was defeated. The creature then proceeded to Mian and Nan. During the chaos, the local president, who looked more like a crime boss, hastily fled in his plane to avoid being devoured. However, a small fragment of Yi He remained stuck to the aircraft's window. The fragment of Yi He, which identified itself as Supreme Leader Y, slipped into the plane through its crevices, greatly startling the crew. One of the agents tried to confront it with a super punch, only to have one of Yi He's tentacles thrust into his body. Then, Gina's arms pierced all the other men on board, leaving no survivors. Meanwhile, in the country of Nan, the creature known as Demora was wreaking massive destruction, annihilating everything in its path. Iha considered itself a living legend for having caused that massacre. From a distance, Pavle Adu, a Western warlock known as the Ice Demon King, observed the devastation. He had a habit of collecting ice trophies from the beasts he defeated, and adding Demora to his collection had become a matter of honor. The warlock's mission was to take the monster to the center of Zia to receive a very valuable reward. Legend had it that from time to time, a sinister witch was born in the West. In ancient times, she was said to have been responsible for the fall of Atlantis, the eruption that destroyed Pompeii, and the Black Death, which decimated half the continent. Because of this, Knights of the Holy Faith began a witch hunt. In the 21st century, however, the witch had not yet appeared. The reason was that she was Pavle Adu's conjoined twin, living hidden beneath his robes. Demora noticed there was still one survivor, the warlock Pavle, who was flying towards it, unleashing ice power in his wake. The monster fired its nuclear fury, but Pavle created an ice mirror to counter. The energy sphere crashed against its own reflection, causing a massive explosion. Yihi noticed the warlock had Western features, and, finding the idea of fighting magic interesting, unleashed another wave of attacks. However, the man quickly vanished and attacked Demora from behind with stalactites. The attack hardly fazed the monster, which retaliated furiously, but the warlock managed to dodge the blow by teleporting. He found it strange that his opponent was merely fleeing, but he soon realized he was being lured into a trap. Given this, he decided to pretend he was falling for the plan. However, when they reached Zia, it was Pavle who became intrigued. As he noticed the monster's movements had grown slower, he then fired a volley of ice arrows at Demora, which didn't move a single muscle to defend itself. This led the warlock to think that the beast might have entered a kind of hibernation to recover its energy. Believing the Demora was vulnerable, Pavle approached, intending to turn it into another one of his trophies. In that same instant, Yihi unleashed his absolute power, but failed to hit the warlock before he teleported. However, a second attack was launched, and this time it struck true, revealing that the creature had only been feigning immobility. With that, Yihi decided to show his true strength and hurled his opponent to the ground. Pavle rose furiously, but the protagonist was already right behind him, whispering in his ear that he knew about the girl hidden beneath his robes. The warlock was incredulous, realizing his adversary knew his sister's secret. Yiha then announced he was there to kill him and commanded the shadow tree, the Demora, to attack. However, being an expert in dark magic, Pavle conjured a magic circle that began to freeze the Demora from its roots to its crown. He had access to an infinite source of mana, supplied by his witch-blooded sister. In mere moments, the Demora turned into an ice statue, and Pavle gazed upon it like an artist before his masterpiece. Suddenly, the plants that made up the creature began to turn golden and shatter the ice that bound them. The warlock couldn't believe he was losing a contest of magic. Pavle considered the situation a mockery. He, who had been bullied as a child for sharing his existence with his sister, refused to suffer another humiliation. Therefore, the warlock summoned an extremely powerful tornado towards Demora. Yi-He, however, did not feel threatened and activated the Supreme Leader for Image Control mode, unleashing several simultaneous techniques. As the typhoon approached, the creature responded with fire. Several incandescent flowers began to appear, until the giant monster spat an immense blaze that consumed everything around it. The heat was so intense that the man of ice began to melt, and thus he failed to see the giant's hand coming for him. He managed to escape being crushed by a hair's breadth and hid among the clouds to recharge his energy and prepare a final blow. His truce was short-lived, as the giant's fingers soon emerged from the mists, revealing Yi-He mounted on his monster's head. The clash between fire and ice resumed, but this time the wizard decided to flee, recognizing he was no match for Yi-He, the supreme leader of the monsters. Yi-He fired a bolt of lightning at the coward, but the wizard managed to dodge it and even mocked his aim. However, the clouds above Pavle's head created the perfect conditions for Yi-He, who summoned a deafening thunderclap. Pavle only saw the flash before him, and due to the intense electrical charge, was prevented from teleporting. Then, a spear of lightning pierced his body, subjecting him to continuous electrocution. Alongside his giant monster, Yi-He watched as the bodies of the wizard and his sister were impaled on ice. It was at that moment, however, that the true witch awakened. Far away, in the Belton Federation, Director Adler received reports that Pavle was fighting a mysterious masked figure. He was furious, as the wizard was supposed to be helping in the battle against Sia. Meanwhile, the vast cloud cover created by the fight began to dissipate, allowing the people of that country to witness the beating the wizard was taking. He ordered the Pangu monster to deliver the finishing blow. As the flames engulfed the ice capsule where the warlock was, the witch's hand subtly shattered the icy layers and effortlessly blocked Yi-He's technique. Then, she released a frigid air that began to envelop the entire Pangu, making Yi-He realize that the woman was even stronger than Chuzhou. The giant monster began to break apart, like a mountain crumbling into rocks. From a distance, Director Adler was stunned to notice that the Witch of the Century had awakened, making the surroundings absurdly cold. The man feared that the planet would turn into a new ice age, and considered using the Eastern secret weapon stationed in space. However, one of his agents reported that Yi-He had already subdued the witch, as he was gripping her firmly with his tentacles. Despite this, she broke free as if she could split her own body into several parts, only to reassemble herself afterward. Yi-He was surprised by the witch's ability to transform into pure energy. Faced with this, he decided to devour her, revealing his celestial net of tentacles, which quickly enveloped the abomination. The capture was so successful that Yi-He even licked his lips, as if facing a tasty treat. The witch let out a deafening scream, which Yi-He could hear even from outside. He judged that while the woman possessed primordial strength, she lacked intelligence. Suddenly, she replicated the form of Pangu using pure ice, but Yi-He's repertoire was immense, and he promptly responded with the 1,000-hand form of the solar disk. Impressed with Yi-He's capabilities, the director wanted to know who that fighter was. In response, the country's AI displayed images of his battle against the three-headed beast in Huadu, leaving the man intrigued by the mention of the Monster Organization and the codename Demonic Eye. Meanwhile, the clash of giants raged on, and the Ice Pangu even lost one of its horns. Even so, the witch continued to cast massive spells. Seeing her as an unruly child, Yi-He invoked the flaming form of Zhulong and attacked with a fire dragon, which was stopped by ice spikes. For Yi-He, however, that was more than enough, and he charged directly at his opponent. The instant he was about to touch her, absolutely everything around turned to ice. The witch then rose, smiling, but this time her body was engulfed in flames. Yi-He suppressed the woman's existence and consumed her, aiming to refine her and bring her under his command. He then destroyed the Belton satellite spying on the battle, and considered all of southeastern Korea pacified. For this reason, he used the cloud-stirring technique, deciding to conceal his form until his integration with the witch was complete. Meanwhile, at Longquay headquarters, the director was receiving information about the rebellion attempt by the Southeastern Triangle countries against Sia. Although he had allies to promote world democracy, he was more pleased with Demora's support. However, he felt apprehensive about the appearance of the monster organization, as well as the emergence and defeat of the 21st 21st century witch, which hinted at a nebulous future. Yi He, for his part, received a legendary item for successfully capturing the witch. He resolved to return to his country while observing the enemy populace, which had been completely eliminated, and concluded that he had to act that way for the good of Sia. He had become the world's guardian, but also its bloodiest and cruelest tyrant. Because of this, Yi He accepted the blood debt he had acquired for the thousands of lives mercilessly reaped. Now, he decided it was time to deal with the 9 families of Huadu and send those ancient mummies back to their sarcophagi. After the region was retaken, colleges returned to normal, and civilians could once again breathe easy. The students returned to their academic routines, and the main topic of conversation was always the masked man and Demora, who had made all the difference in the war. Photos of Yi He's monsters were even circulating, treated almost like collectibles. As one of the students speculated that the masked man could be among them, the others bowed to Yi He, who had just entered the Dragon's Blood headquarters. He greeted the young men, who were surprised to receive a greeting. However, the protagonist had only one thought in mind: to defeat the 9 families of Huadu, to find his good old friend, Chuzhou. Chuzhou was meditating in the training room to raise his martial chi when Ouyang appeared to inform him that someone wanted to see him. The boy smiled, thinking it would be Yi He, but the vice president commented that it was another illustrious person. Chuzhou then went to meet Chu Fengqi, the firstborn of one of the 9 families of Huadu and a sort of half-brother to the hero. Immediately, Chuzhou remarked that Fengqi's family had hidden during the war. The wealthy young man did not object but defended himself, stating it was for a good reason, as the country was greatly weakened, and it was time for the 9 families to take the reins of the situation again. Chuzhou, however, was unwilling to listen to that nonsense. Even so, Fengqi extended his hand, offering the boy an alliance. The offer was promptly refuted by Chuzhou, who declared that his surname did not come from the Huadu lineage. Fengqi withdrew, already expecting such a reaction, but commented on the glory achieved by Dragon's Blood and asked if Chuzhou would like to become the association's president and the representative of all Huadu students. The boy was paralyzed for a few seconds, but left without paying any attention to the playboy, who still insisted on the matter. Then, Chuzhou remarked that not even in his thoughts would he stand a chance against Yi He, the current president of the association. Feeling disrespected by the refusal, Chu Fengqi activated his insane power, as his family needed the support of the Huadu students. The force was so great that Chuzhou even staggered. Faced with this, the rich kid gave the boy one last chance to accept the offer and become powerful. Chuzhou realized he was in an illusion as blood cascaded before him. A sinister monster appeared, accompanied by a bizarre masked figure, whom Chuzhou judged to be the warrior responsible for decimating several sovereigns. He then wanted to know what that being was doing in Huadu. The being, who possessed a demonic eye, invited him to join the monster organization. Curious, Chuzhou asked why that sovereign was interested in him. The demonic eye replied that the boy's monster destiny was of interest to his organization. Still thoughtful, the young man wanted to know if Yi He was also part of the group. The masked man confirmed, which led Chuzhou to accept the proposal immediately. The sovereign said he would look for the new member at night and decided to help him with the current impasse, firing a laser into Chuzhou's body that enhanced his martial IQ. Back in reality, Chu Fengqi sensed the evolution in the boy's bloodline, but he was not intimidated and also raised his martial level. The two attacked at the same time, and the playboy kept trying to convince Chuzhou to join him. However, the boy replied that he would not join cowards who had abandoned Huadu when the city needed them most. Suddenly, Ouyang opened the door, and Yi He was there, simply watching the duel. Fengqi scoffed at Chuzhou and claimed he could defeat everyone in the association combined. At that very moment, however, Yi He silenced the man with just one hand. Chu Fengqi activated the power in his hands to try and break Yi He's grip, who held him aloft, but the effort didn't faze him in the slightest. The eldest son of the Chu family widened his eyes in disbelief. Yi He commented that now it was his turn to attack. Ouyang nearly panicked, as Fengqi was a distinguished guest, but Yi He paid no mind and threw him through the window. Meanwhile, Chuzhou pondered that, from that moment on, he could turn into a real monster. Suddenly, the atmosphere changed, and the two friends hugged, having missed each other dearly. They went out to talk, leaving Ouyang with a bewildered expression, unsure how to explain the situation to the Chu family. During their conversation, Yi He explained to his friend about his personalities, but Chuzhou was more curious to know when he had joined the monster organization. Yi He told him that the demonic eye had invited him after the mission in Linshui County, omitting the fact that he himself had saved everyone. He added, lying, that he had grown much stronger with some extra help from the organization. Chuzhou wanted to know how many masters of that level existed in the organization, and Yi He answered without hesitation that there were about 5 like him. This made Chuzhou wary of the possibility that they might try to invade Xia, but Yi He reassured him, saying that everything was under control and that he just had to follow the demonic eye's instructions. After their talk, Chujo said his goodbyes and left the office, still a little worried. Alone, Yihe grew pensive, for he knew he would never hurt his friend, even though the next plan required his participation. The problem was that the 9 families had always held great influence, even over emperors, throughout the millennia. Yihe began researching on Manhwa and found confidential documents. He had already discovered during the county mission with the demon Barros that faith was the greatest source of energy. The documents revealed that since the beginning of Sia, the mages and alchemists of the First Dynasty had created technologies to absorb this force called Dragon Chi, which bound the royal family to the nation's destiny under the emperor's orders. This meant that if one of the royal families suffered a catastrophe, they could manipulate this Chi to cause natural disasters throughout Sia. For this reason, he knew that eliminating the 9 families was an extremely risky mission for the entire population. The solution was to steal the Dragon Chi, which was the source of their power and confidence. The method to do so was also described on Manhwa. Every 70 years, the families chose one of their members to be the guardian of the Chi. This person was chained and isolated, serving as a living vessel for the power. Despite it being a cruel method, he needed to transfer this Chi to Chujo, as he possessed royal blood. However, he promised himself he would find a way to save his friend at the end of the process. With the plan laid out, Yi went to find Chujo, assuming the form of the demonic eye, and began a baptism ritual to increase the new member's power. In agony, Chujo covered his eyes. The demonic eye revealed that it had injected him with an energy that would make him see the world differently, and then baptized him as its disciple with that exclusive vision technique. In response, Chujo thanked him and called him master. All of this was happening in the boys' room while he meditated. Yihe ordered the new disciple to wash the blood from his eyes with the water from the air. While the new technique was integrating into Chujo's eyes, Yihe also granted him the necessary energy to glimpse the spiritual world and strengthened his entire body with his YH cells. By making Chujo's body more resilient, Yihe believed he could finally withstand the dragon's chi, which was necessary to complete his mission. Afterward, Yihe went to visit his master, Gongke, who was quite irritated because he had disappeared without a word. However, the young man used his charisma and showed her the gift he had brought to calm the situation, earning her forgiveness. She then asked what he wanted. Without beating around the bush, Yihe said he needed the second half of the scripture of Bodhi of the murderous heart. The woman was impressed to learn that her student had already surpassed the Grandmaster level, but she felt proud and put on her glasses to review the material and help him. Meanwhile, Yihe's clone, in the form of the demonic eye, was training Chujo to use his new powers. The young man concentrated and his pupils dilated in an unusual way, allowing him to see the world through the eyes of causality. Upon seeing the world through causality, Chujo felt much more sensitive and became confident that he could defeat his past self in just 3 minutes. However, the demonic eye explained that this power also allowed him to create illusions and manifest colossal divine forms. Suddenly, Chujo's eyes began to burn, and his master clarified that he would need to train hard to control and increase his proficiency with the new technique. After a few hours, Chujo was exhausted, but he had no intention of giving up. His master handed him a small case, stating that the learning process wouldn't happen overnight. Upon opening it, Chujo came face to face with a slime that seemed to welcome him, and he jumped back in surprise, thinking it was a beast. He reassured him and introduced the creature as Ah Fei, a great friend. Chujo commented that the creature resembled Yihe himself. Then, the slime began to rub against the young man, who felt his life force promptly increase. At this, the demonic eye ordered him to continue his training. Meanwhile, in the imperial capital of Gunan, the elders were furious about the disrespect Chu Fengqi had suffered. Their fury intensified because the president of the Dragon's Blood Association himself had admitted to humiliating the young man, leaving the leaders in disbelief that Fengqi had lost to a freshman. They understood that both the Longquei and the Huadu were sending a message of defiance against the 9 families. One of the elders, agitated, began to incite the others to go to war, but another immediately reprimanded him, arguing that such an action would earn the people's antipathy. The first, however, insisted on his position, and the atmosphere between the two grew heavy. The argument was interrupted by the intervention of the clan patriarch, Chu Hongtang. He declared that the priority was the Dragon Chi passage ceremony, which would take place in 2 months. The decision left the red-bearded elder even more furious, to the point of vowing to kill the other. Outside the city walls, Afei felt frustrated, as only someone with royal blood could enter. Mentally scolded by Yihe, he soon devised a plan to get what he needed at a place frequented by the elite, the Golden Horse Club, a venue filled with lively and beautiful people. In the club's office, the manager was trying to teach an employee some manners when she was interrupted by Yihe's arrival, who asked for a word. The woman nearly fell out of her chair in shock, but the protagonist managed to deceive her. He then requested the list of all VIP guests, along with compromising information on each of them. Meanwhile, a man known as Master Liu arrived in the main hall. Despite his arrogant demeanor, he was revered by those present. However, the heirs of the local families did not seem pleased with the presence of the nobles from Huadu. Liu made his way to a VIP seat and asked what the establishment had to offer. An employee commented that the city had the best women. The noble then wanted to know if it was true that the city's #1 warrior was a woman. The employee, in a fawning tone, replied that the warrior worked for Longquei and that for that reason, they didn't usually get involved with that group. The response irritated Liu, who was displeased to learn that the people of Gunan were still undecided on whom to support. Suddenly, Liu smashed a bottle over the employee's head and declared that Jia belonged to royalty, not to Longquei. Then, the noble walked away, scorning the people of the city. His path was blocked when he bumped into one of his own bodyguards and was immediately subjected to an illusory vision created by Yi He, in which he saw a magical beast before him. Liu tried to look for an alarm but was struck by the protagonist's needle finger technique. The attack caused his head to swell like a bladder and explode before his companions, who were covered in blood and began to cry for help. With a sadistic expression, the protagonist told them to calm down, stating that he was just playing with them as if they were babies. The third heir of the Liu family, who had been spared, tried to negotiate with Yi He. However, instead of talking, Yi He prepared his needle finger attack and plunged it into the center of the young man's forehead. He ironically thanked the heir for identifying himself, allowing A Fei to enter his body and possess him, leaving the few remaining survivors stunned. Taking control of the young Liu's body, A Fei received Yi He's order to turn the others into servants. After giving the order, Yi He departed. With an agent now infiltrated in the imperial city, the protagonist could begin his sewing mission. To do so, he needed to enter a deep meditation to spread the infection, as the process carried out by A Fei only worked on weak-minded individuals. Furthermore, to save Chuzhou, he needed to deeply understand the dragon's qi, which required him to match his spiritual strength with his physical strength. He knew he could only achieve this evolution through the causal energy manifested through his eyes. Therefore, he activated the 10-headed hyena to awaken this power immediately. His body began to turn golden, and the new power he acquired seemed greater than he had ever imagined. 2 months later, Yi He, now referred to as the demonic eye, was training with Chuzhou. He asked his disciple to show how much he had evolved so that he could grant him a new state of causal energy through his sight. In response, Chuzhou opened his eyes. Unleashing all his power, Chuzhou released the beast form through his icy aura, making his master, the demonic eye, proud. His master, in turn, activated the power of the Hellstar to break the ice conjured by his apprentice. Thanks to his new gaze, Chuzhou was able to precisely track the movement of the luminous spheres, which could intercept any approaching object. In response, the boy unleashed the ice dragon, which fired several arrows at the master's pulsating ring and then confidently attacked with its claws. However, the spheres exploded, leaving Chuzhou petrified. He was then hit by several simultaneous blows. Yet, the demonic eye noticed something unexpected. Propelled by the dragon monster, Chuzhou revealed that it was just a decoy and attacked his master from behind. The master identified the maneuver as a clone decoy technique, but ended up covered in ice. Meanwhile, Chuzhou seized his only opportunity to approach him. However, the master had already moved to dodge. Even so, the ice dragon charged forward, swallowed him, and split his frozen form in half. For a moment, Chuzhou thought he had won, but it was all just an illusion. Yi then declared that his friend would be trapped there forever, explaining that he did not possess the 10-headed Jina, which used the energy of causality as its primary source. The master added that only by stimulating the negative emotions from intense memories could Chuzhou reach his peak. Immersed in the illusion, Chuzhou saw himself as a child, chained and cold. His father was crouching before the clan patriarch, who was ordering him to eliminate the woman by his side. The man begged the old man, who was also his father, to spare their lives. However, the patriarch showed no mercy, especially since his son had shamed the Chu family name by running away with a commoner and conceiving a bastard. The mother pleaded for her son to be spared, promising to give her own life in return. Outraged, the young Chuzhou ordered his father to show his grandmaster strength and escape with his mother. As the old man's hand rose for the execution, Chuzhou despaired. The hand came down, and in her final moment, the mother wished for her son to become a true warrior. The boy screamed and, in his fury, managed to break the chains, awakening his power. The demonic eye watched intently. Sensing his disciple had succeeded, Chuzhou opened his eyes. His expression already changed. He now understood how the eyes of causality worked and felt grateful to have seen his mother one more time, in addition to having acquired special techniques for each eye. The master explained that only those who carried a profound pain held the key to awakening such abilities. Then, he ordered Chuzhou to attack him with the new techniques. The boy hesitated, fearing it might be dangerous, but Yi remarked that he could never be destroyed in such a way. At this, Chuzhou activated his power, which emanated an absurd energy. Despite cutting through everything around him, the master didn't move a single muscle, remaining still in front of him the next second. This left Chuzhou incredulous, but the demonic eye was pleased with his disciple's performance. Satisfied, he asked to see the manifestation of his divine form, which would qualify qualify him for the organization's missions. Chuzhou asked if such a manifestation wouldn't blind him, but the demonic eye stated that his armor would protect him. At that moment, Ah Fei appeared and told him to trust the process. Chuzhou then allowed the slime to enhance his current state. The two merged, and even A Fei felt the impact of the boy's eyes of causality. Thus, the great divine form was manifested, transforming him into the great and true Lord Erlang of the Qingyuan divinity.